still living high burden or high risk areas of the country. No doubt, Pakistan made a significant development reduction in the estimated case load during 2020 as compared to the 2015, when 40% estimated case load was reduced in the country. During 2021, a total 375,000 confirmed malaria cases reported from the public health facilities of the country. However, last year, during 2020, when there was a massive floods in the country, the number of cases increased to 3 million. That was a dramatic change in the epidemiology of malaria in the country when we have 300,000 cases in 2021 and it reached to 3 million cases in the country in 2022. This outbreak has been ranked as the heaviest resurgent in the history of the 50-year history of the country. For last 50 years, first time we are in the state of emergency in the country. WHO expert expected that the intense and the extended transmission in the country, because normally the malaria transmission in the country is still from the August to November. But this year, after the floods, we have till end of the March 250,000 confirmed cases till the end of the March, while these months are considered non-transmission period in the country, which indicate that still we are under the state of emergency for malaria transmission in the country. In 2020, program developed a long-term strategy, malaria elimination, targeting the malaria-free Pakistan till 2035. Regardless these challenges of the floods and other challenges, National Malaria Control Program still believe that we are on a track to achieve the elimination till 2035. Because we have this strategy in a phase-wise manner, that during the first phase till 2027, we have the target of malaria elimination in the Punjab province, which is 56% of total population of the country. And the other provinces, Azad Jammu and Kashmir, Gilgit-Baltistan, and Islamabad territory area. And these provinces constitute 70% of population of the country, which means that still after these challenges, 70% of the population is still living in an area where we can achieve the elimination till 27. A very positive development in the program in the country that all provincial program has been transferred to regular side. Maybe the regular side is a new term for you. It means that these provincial program no more donor dependence. Now the government has taken all the provincial program in its pocket, and when the provincial government has a fixed allocation of the funds for these provincial program. So all the provincial program now in the pocket of the government of Pakistan are the provincial government, which means there is sustainability for the provincial program. Can you move somebody? Right? It is something problem with. Yeah. Yeah, these are some few technical information about the program. As we told, that main malaria transmission season in Pakistan is post August to November. But after the floods, we have around the year transmission until end of the March last month. We have 250,000 malaria cases in the country, while this period is at almost non-transmission. Annually, we have the 4 to 4.5 million cases, clinical cases, which are treated as a malaria infection. We have two species of the malaria, Vivax, which constitute 78% of the total caseload, and 21% is falciparum, and 1% is Vix. Key preventive measures in the Pakistan is the use of long-lasting bed net, which are mainly through the Global Fund support, and indoor residual spray and larva source management. However, larva source management mainly is used for against the dengue control. We have two major species, Culis facie and Stephensii. But after the flood, when we have an intensive survey in the country after the flood, we found that another species, that's a Pulcharimus, and this is a very surprising finding in the program that the traditionally believed Q. facie, there was absolutely zero population, while we are believing that the Q. facie is a major malaria vector in the country, even before the partition of 1947. But after the flood, the Q. facie totally wiped out, and we have the 100% population of a new species, that's the Q. facie, Pulcharimus. Not a single specimen of Q. facie was reported from these flood-affected areas, while we have a huge and intense survey of these flood-affected areas. While on the other hand, we have 20 times more cases of malaria, while there is no traditionally believed a single specimen in this area. And this is a very big challenge for the program, that we have this phenomena is not under investigation, but national and international experts, that maybe is this change in composition of a species due to climate change, and what is the potential role of this Pulcharimus in the country. Apparently, it has a very big role of this current transmission, because this Pulcharimus is a confirmed malaria vector in Iran and Afghanistan. Now we are making the gene sequencing of this population from Pakistan, and we will see that whether it is a Afghan population or from the Iran population. So it's a big challenge for the program now. If it is proven, and being a vector control expert, I do believe that's a proven, that then national program has to revise its entire strategy based on the feeding and resting behavior of the Q. facie. So these are some technical information. Now, use of malaria, use of ITN in Pakistan. Pakistan used the ITN since 2005 on a rolling approach, giving the coverage to the target area over the months. And we have started the systematic mass distribution campaign in 2018. And these are the history of we have done 5 campaigns till now, from 18 to 22. And during these 5 campaigns, we have distributed 21.1 million bed nets in the country. And these are the 5 campaigns which are done in the country. So I will not go in detail because yes, quality assurance in mechanism in the Pakistan for ITN in Pakistan. Thanks to Global Fund, with that, since 2007, we have 100% bed net from the Global Fund support, though almost 5% has also been procured to the government resources by the provinces. However, despite the fact that we have the 100% bed net from the Global Fund, our National Malaria Control Program, as a principal recipient, has only role in the post-shipment inspection when the net arrives in the regional and national warehouses. Both PR, currently we have 2 PRs, have no role in the involved pre-shipment inspection of the country. However, what we procure through the government resources, the national program has the full involvement in the pre-shipment inspection as well, is mandatory. If the commodities are coming from the outside of the country, that the inspection at the port of arrival is mandatory. For the acceptance of the shipment, we have the bioefficacy and chemical contents test is mandatory. If, according to national guidelines, if the 5%, more than 5% samples are faulty or out of specification, entire lot will be rejected or replaced at the cost of the supplier. Repeated faulty material supply result in the blacklisting of the firm, either 3-year, 5-year, or permanently. However, none of these conditions are applied for the Global Fund or donor support project. It's not changing over here. Yeah. Sorry, there's. It's next slide. Yeah. Check with the previous one. Okay. So I will give it. Okay. Thank you. Thank you. So this is our national quality assurance mechanism system. So I just gave the example of my fourth agenda point was the challenges which the country faced during the supply of 2020, when we have country received a 2.1 million bed nets from the Global Fund. And during the inspection, and their nets were provided by IDA, a procuring agent of the Global Fund. And during the pre-inspection, shipment inspection was done by the Crown agent. And during the post-inspection, both PRs identified a serious concern about the dimension as well as the potential chemical contents of the supply. According to the IDA guidelines, we draw 1,000 samples from the supply. And not surprisingly, not any side of this 100% bed net was same. If one side is side is 184 centimeter, other side is 163. There was a huge difference. And the same is case with the more serious case was with the width of the program, with the bed net. When one side upper limit was 155 centimeter and lower limits of 133 centimeter. So it was a very surprising bed net for us that which we received these bed nets. And there was not a single bed net was according to the specification of the required specification. Sorry, there is. Oops. Yes. So this is the results of our inspection, that the required length was 180 and the minimum length was recorded 163 and maximum 203. And the average was, so length was not a big problem, but the problem was that both side of length was not equal. In all sample bed nets, the same is case with the width. The major issue was the width of the bed net, and which was very small in 133 up to. A joint report was prepared by both PR. My colleague is sitting, Dr. Mahai sitting here, and we prepared both report with the clear decision not to accept this supply. A series of discussion was done with the donor, procuring agent, and Crown agent. And after the discussion, again, Crown agent was appointed as a third-party inspection for these same bed net. It is important to note that the Crown agent was the same agent who declared the 100% bed net before the pre-shipment inspection. So there was a very big concern of conflict of interest raised by the both PR, that how a Crown agent can make a different findings as compared to previous finding, because they have cleared all these 100% bed net, but it was not agreed by the donor. So however, both PRs were invited as an observer along with the LFA. So the third-party inspection was done by again Crown agent, and both PRs along with LFA were invited as observer. There were many limitations for both PR during third inspection by Crown agent. However, both PRs were committed not to compromise on the quality of the bed net. The acceptable range was decided by the Crown agent, that is the 148 centimeter is acceptable range for the width, and 168 centimeter of the length. If the bed net has a 148, again 160, that will be acceptable. If the bed net has a length of 168 against the 180, it is acceptable. According to the guidelines, it was decided to measure all four sides of the bed net. However, Crown agent used a very anonymous formula that if this randomly select the bigger side of 1 centimeter first, they don't take the second reading of the other side. And if they randomly select the smaller side, then they take the reading of the other side to make the maximum qualification of the bed net as a pass. So this was very interesting and formula for the program, but we have to work with these formulas. But it was also agreed that the measurements which will be taken by the Crown agent will be counter-measured by the program as the observer. And what the Crown agent make the qualification for all the bed nets when the counter measurement made by the both PRs, 100% bed net again reject disqualified. We have the confirmatory test that we have the metallic frame, and none of the any bed net which was sampled was fit on this metallic frame, because which has the length of the 180 and width of the 160 and height 150, which means that, however, and we were very happy, at least Crown agent after the third inspection said that more than 50% bed net are out of specification. And the same Crown agent was saying that 100% bed net was according to the specification. But after this third inspection, at least they admit that the 50% bed net are out of specification. While on the other hand, program declared 100% bed net disqualified because none of the sample bed net was fit on this metallic frame. And the upper figure, which is picture, shows that the white bed net which have been procured through the government resources, and that is a very fit on the frame. But the bed net which was supplied in 2020, none of the single bed net was fit on this frame. However, there is another very big issue. When we identified this big issue of the dimension of the bed net, both PRs suggested to have a chemical analysis of these bed nets. Unfortunately, it was not agreed by the donor. And even it was said that if the program do this analysis at its own cost, result will not be accepted. This is very unfortunate. However, if the program do this analysis at its own cost, the result will not be accepted. And very surprisingly, we received the new guideline from the Global Fund during 2023, no post-delivery inspection by the PRs. So PR had no role even in the post-delivery inspection. This is very surprising. Though this condition under the discussion with the higher authorities of the ministry, and still we are not accepting this condition. Oops. And the other issue was with this supply of 2020 wet bales. There were 5 containers which were fully wet with these bed nets. And when we opened these 5 containers have the 5,650 bales which were totally wet, and this issue was reported from one warehouse from our co-PR Indus Hospital. Abundant of water was inside the container. When we opened this container, there was abundant of water. So no sample was taken from these wet bales because they were already disqualified for the acceptance. Insurance was claimed by our co-PR, which was received. All parties, DOMs, Direct National Malaria Control Program, Indus Hospital, and the Global Fund agreed on the compensation, and which was very minute compensation, though it was not agreed by the program, but we have to agree due to certain reasons. And these bed nets, which were in 2020, were distributed in 20 campaign, then 21 through ANC, and 22 when they have completed almost their 3 years of life. Although PR suggested the chemical analysis before the distribution, but still we have to distribute these bed nets. I'm sorry, I have to be very open, being a national program, because I'm responsible for this quality of these bed nets. And we have to distribute these bed nets even after the 3 years when they have completed their life. Challenges for now this year, we have our 5th largest campaign plan in 2023. And this year we are receiving the bed nets from India. Although there is a suspension of the trade between India and Pakistan due to certain political reasons, but we are asked to, you will have to receive the bed nets from India, despite the fact that there is local manufacturing of the bed net in the country, which is WHO pre-qualified. But still we are asked to receive these bed net from India, 6.1 million. Unfortunately, we have different challenges for this supply because these bed nets are origin from India, and we have some political unstable relationship with India, and between India and Pakistan, the political situation changes in every day, every week, every month, because we have very fragile relationship with India. But we have to receive this net from India, And we are actually, when this was planned, it was decided that BedNet will be supplied to Pakistan in the October 2020. But still, this month, we have only received the first tranche of 375,000 BedNet from India. We are afraid that at any stage of time, when the situation will become more worse between the both countries, this supply can be suspended, and what we will do for the 2023 campaign. So program suggested repeatedly to consider the procurement of ITN from locally manufacturing WHO pre-qualified brand from Pakistan. But unfortunately, the Global Fund has some management issues with the local manufacturers, which we suggested to settle down very quickly so that we can get the BedNet from locally to save the time and money. Recommendations. So this is my final slide. PR should only accept the shipment only as per required specification. But unfortunately, we were forced to receive these BedNets. For future procurement, this is the main problematic recommendation, problematic condition for this supply, that according to IDA guidelines, there was relaxation of plus minus 7% of the margin of error, which means if the BedNet is 148 centimeter wide, you will have to accept it. If it is 168 centimeter length, you will have to accept it. So that's why in our recommendation, our reports, we said for future procurement, no relaxation for this 7.5% of the margin of error. Because when we procure from the government's resources, not a single percentage has the relaxation. That's why what we receive through the government resources, that is 100% according to the specification. PR program must be the part of the post-delivery inspection, because the current new guidelines again make the limitation for the program. It is a part of the program that program should enhance its capacity for operational research, which include durability study, bioefficacy study, and community-based surveys. Third is very important. Fourth, the next one. Program must have the robust system of the post-market surveillance with the frequency of sample collection, 6 months, 12 months, 18 months, and 24 months. Normally, program take the sample immediately after the supply, and that is not a very good frequency of collection. So at least we should have the fixed frequency of sample collection so that we can monitor the efficacy of BedNet throughout its lifespan. And this is very important for the manufacturer as well. There is a need to review the internal quality assurance mechanism of manufacturer as well. Why I put this recommendation? Very interesting, and definitely you will laugh. When we received the BedNet after this 2020 supply, we received the BedNet which were much bigger than our required specification. In 2020, we received a very small BedNet. In 2021, we received a much bigger BedNet according against our specification, which means that there is a need that the manufacturer should also review its internal quality assurance mechanism. Why they provided the bigger BedNet against our required specification? Just to make us happy after receiving this, after receiving small BedNet? Shelf life should be considered while finalizing the manufacture and supply. Lead time should be shorter, otherwise distribution BedNet include net is during non-transmission period, and this is a big challenge for the program. Last very bitter recommendation, the manufacturer, procuring agent, supplier must be blacklisted by the donor as well as the program in case of the substandard supply. I think this is, thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Dr. Mukhtar. That was such an interesting presentation. Yeah, so we will move to the next presentation. It will be by, sorry. Excuse me. The second presentation will be from Levi Hine from Liberia. He will be making a presentation on Liberia's experience with durability monitoring of IG2. Welcome.
Thank you very much. Good morning, everybody. So I'm going to take you through Liberia's experience with durability monitoring. Actually, this presentation should be about the RG2 nets, but our distribution of RG2 nets was in 2021, and we just completed our first 12 months of the study. So we did parietral only nets distribution in 2018, and we were able to get some findings. I think Hannah talked about them yesterday. And we're going to drive you through that, plus the 12 months experience we have with RG2. So the program has been considering these studies over time with nets durability and the physical and synthesizer durability of standard parietral nets distributed in Liberia in 2018 were monitored from August 2018 to April 2021 in 2 of our counties, Grangeda in the southeast and Lofa in the north. And the nets at 145 dinyl polyethylene, not treated with after cypermethrin. And so this is the study period. It started in April 2018. We did a distribution, and in August we started the study, and the study ended in April 2021. Now the design, as you can see on the map there, Lofa is up there, and then you have Grangeda in the southeast. And then the design of the RTNs brain monitor in areas with different environmental and population characteristics. So the nets were enrolled 3 months after the campaign and follow up through annual assessment for 36 months. The campaign nets from neighboring households were withdrawn from study sites for the effectiveness testing at each annual assessment. The primary outcomes were the percentage of cohort nets surviving in serviceable physical conditions as measured by the proportionate whole index and the percentage of nets achieving optimal insecticidal effectiveness. So at 36 months, we found out that half of the 744 enrolled nets had a known outcome and contributed to physical survival estimates. And so the total attrition at 36 months was 59% in Grangeda and 44% in Lofa County. Attrition due to wear and tear was 11% and 7% respectively in Grangeda and Lofa. So this is our testing room. And the different causes of attrition, you'll see that nets being given away was one of the major causes of attrition, especially in Grangeda and in Lofa as well. It was the leading cause of attrition. The nets were given away to relatives. I think this slide is repeating. So at 36 months, 9% in Grangeda and 11% in Lofa of remaining cohort were classified as stone by their PH scores. Considering attrition and physical integrity, the percentage of RTNs surviving in serviceable physical condition was 70% in Grangeda and 77% in Lofa. These results correspond to estimated median lives of 4.6 years and 3.9 years, respectively, in the 2 counties. So this is the physical survival graph, which is measuring the nets by year. And the effectiveness of the insecticide, the optimal insecticide effectiveness at 36 months was 60% in Grangeda and 83% in Lofa. And the results from Grangeda show variation, greater variation for both measures at all rounds. So in these 2 counties, the median survival was greater than the assumed 3 years used for planning purposes and was given by low levels of attrition due to the wear and tear and high physical integrity over 36 months. A high proportion of RTN remain optimally insecticidal when considering WHO thresholds. While few significant differences in hostile environments and net care practices were identified between sites, the study adds to the literature highlighting the positive association between favorable net care attitudes and better survival outcomes. So the results are helping the program in terms of distribution strategies to reach and sustain target coverage levels. And we also have a manuscript that is coming forth for this study. So for RG2, we did a mass campaign in June 2021, and the results you're going to see are preliminary, and they are for the recent 12 months. So Anopheles gambius population were resistant to tester pyrethrum in all the 15 counties. Despite an increase in susceptibility after a pre-exposure to PBO as synthesis, full susceptibility was observed in the counties. PBO also improved the susceptibility of the vector in some sites, but the final mortalities were still less than 98% threshold. So Gambia susceptible to chlorphenapur in all sites. The test performed using chlorphenapur show an increase of mortality rates from 24 hours to 48 hours, and full susceptibility occur at 72 hours exposure rate. Based on this data, the country decided to replace Dura nets by RG2 nets, and a manuscript for insecticide resistant study has been drafted and is being completed by for molecular data. So this is the study timeline. It started in June. We did a distribution in June 2021. And we deployed the nest in Bombing County in the Northwest, and then in Bon County in North Central region. So the pre-distribution was July 2021 for Bombing County and July 2021 for Bon County. And the first round of 12 months has ended June 2022. And by next month, we'll be ending the second round. And the third round is expected to be in 2024 June. So the SDM 12-month survey completed in Bombing and Bon counties, and the next samples cutting schedule for next week. So we are in conversation with our partners to start looking at the survey beginning next week. So the approach should be considered in countries that have previously collected durability monitoring data and are primarily interested in evaluating bioefficacy, particularly for new nest type. So the study is ongoing, and we are having a study in Swakoko, Bon County, one of our districts, and Swemeka district as a health district in Bombing County as well. And we are having 30 nests per site are withdrawn for bioassay and chemical content analysis. We have completed 12 months, and the chemical content analysis performed at CDC Atlanta, and then the bioassay tuner test done by Pansverb in Benin. So this is the picture of the tuner test setup for testing, and nest samples were tested in a lab in Benin. So the 12-month result shows that in Bombing County, the total attrition was 24.8%, and attrition due to wear and tear was 10%. Nest inserviceable condition was 96.7%. 72 hours mortality against resistant mosquito strain was 93%, and blood feeding inhabitation was 92.8%, and the mean chlorphenapur year chemical content was 2.7, and reduction compared to manufacturer target dose was 44%. In Bon County, we had attrition 24.4%, And we have attrition due to wear and tear, 4.5%. Nets in serviceable condition, 93%. 72-hour mortality, 85.8%. Blood feeding, 88.4%. And then the chemical content, we have 2.7%. And then the reduction in compared to manufacturer target is 44%. So attrition due to wear and tear, also known as the discarded nets, includes nets that were destroyed, thrown away, or used for other purposes. Serviceable nets are nets with holes in a good condition to provide protection to the end users. So for blood feeding inhabitation is assessed by comparing the proportion of blood-fed females alive or dead in treated and controlled tunnels. In Bomi County, we have 92.8%, and Bon County, we have 88.4% of resistant strain mosquitoes that were not able to feed on guinea pig during the tunnel test. Sorry, I'm not seeing it. So for the physical integrity that we observe, in Bomi, the number of nests were 30, and the number of nests with whole were 13. And the ones that were classified as good were 26. And the ones that were two was 1. And those classified as serviceable were 29. And among RTNS with whole, we had 13. And the median PHR for nets with any whole was 24 during the first round. And in Bunk, we had the same number of 30. And nets with any whole, we had 20. Classified as good, we had 21. Two, we had 2. Next classified as serviceable we had 28. And among RTNs with holes, we had the number 20. And the median PHR for nets with any hole was 55. So our conclusion is that at 12 months, more than 20% of the nets were lost due to various reasons. And mortality and blood feeding inhibition of the 12-month nets was high and with positive results. More than 40% reduction in chemical content at 12 months and could not be a bit concerning. And more than 90% of the nets formed were kept in good and serviceable condition. 83.3% of the net passed for either the 72-hour mortality or the BFR deviation criteria. However, it is equally important to state that despite this reduction, 72-hour mortality and BFR are still very high in the study. So our next steps, like we said, we are working with our partners to look at the 24 months, and we'll continue to support the streamlined durability monitoring of IG2s distributed in 2021. And the contribution of IG2 nets on malaria transmission will be assessed after 24 and 36 months of the survey. And we'll be looking at the climate, the RTNS entomologic data as well. Thank you very much for listening.
Thank you so much, Levi. Before we move to the next presentation, we are going to open the floor for questions. So please feel free to ask the questions on the two presentation.
Thank you for those presentations. Mohammed, I have a question, a couple questions for you. I'm so sorry you had to go through that. That's just incredible. A question, how long were the nets in containers? And did you take any heat, humidity kind of data of those containers? As you know, we did the container storage guidance a while back, so I'm just curious about that. And then I'm curious if there were spikes in cases post distribution of the ones that you were forced to distribute, the wet ones, for example, if you actually had a spike in cases after that. And then I guess my question is on expiry dates. I think my concern is, I mean, we know that nets are good if they're not opened. So for me, I just kind of question the need for expiry dates, but.
This is Rune Basseland from PPP Hollandia these days. My question is to Mukhtar. Can you hear me now?
Yeah.
Great, perfect. So Rune from PPP Hollandia. So Mukhtar, thanks for your presentation. It was a bit shocking and maybe not so surprising, at least from my point of view. Actually, my first question would be to a Global Fund person in this room, if there are any, to take the question. And that would be why Global Fund would resist the quality assurance activities on their procurement activities. I think that's a bit strange. My second question is to Mukhtar directly. And that is, what you explained was basically that you received these nets, which were out of specification on measurement, which is fairly easy to determine and fairly incontroversial, I would say. And then you saw that Global Fund allowed the pre-shipment inspection company to come in and do a reassessment of their own work as a way of a second quality assessment. And then the Global Fund also resisted that you did any kind of chemical analysis or biological activity analysis on the nets. So with all, and still insisted that you distributed these nets. These kind of, let's say, objections from their side, how come you didn't take this to the OIG?
So last word is to go to OIG, if I remember.
Okay.
Tony, your last word was for OIG.
OIG. Yes. Why you didn't go to the OIG?
Yeah. Yeah.
This one needed to be escalated.
Okay, this is a very interesting discussion, especially using Uganda experience on stakeholders management. Maybe possibly you can provide more lights on your relationship between the Global Fund country team and your management team. Are you on the same page? Are you sharing the same vision? It's like it causes some more problems than you think. That is the number. Then the number two, how do you relate with the Global Fund or the team in your country? Because most of these things come from the RFA, your RFA with your PwC in your country, because they are the eyes of Global Fund on the ground. Most of those local issues are raised by local auditors of the GF. So we can start from there to see how to solve the issues. I think that is, then on the wet nets, it has not come out clearly to me the degree of wetness for those nets, because we know there are very many factors. In Uganda, we had some wet nets, but it resulted from the damage of the containers. So on your side, what the degree is, because we know even the packaging parameters has a contribution on protecting the wetting of these nets. So possibly you will give more light on that. Thank you.
All right, Victor Adebayo from CRF. So thank you, Dr. Mukhtar, for your presentation. I have a couple of questions. First is I'm a bit curious to know how you managed those nets that you declared 100% out of specification. Were you compelled to distribute them by the Global Fund, or your program insisted on ensuring that those nets do not get to the end users. Then you did mention that some of your national regulations do not apply to donor supply, or if I'm mistaken. I'm a bit worried why you do have regulations that do not apply to supplies from donors. Then lastly, do you have any form of coordination platforms to ensure that this conversation between you and the donor is end-to-end and seamless, such a way that you don't have this kind of knee-jerk reaction to situations like this, especially for net campaigns that you do know that happens every 3 to 4 years. So it would be good to know whether you have a system in place to coordinate your quality assurance mechanism. Thank you.
Yes. Thank you very much. I wanted to ask two questions is on the post-delivery inspection that you mentioned that the PR must be a part of that process. And if I missed something, I was wondering then who does quality assurance in your country? My assumption is that the National Regulatory Agency represents you, the PR, in conducting the post-delivery inspection, sampling of the nets, and eventually testing them. So when you say they must be a part of that process, I'm wondering whether there is another entity that is doing that work on your behalf. And in fact, if then if there's another entity, then you need to put your National Regulatory Agency at the forefront to do that on your behalf. The second comment is if the Global Fund had objected to a chemical analysis, I think independently as a country, you should have gone ahead to do your own tests and pay for it and get your own results. And I think you should be able to do this. Even exporting samples to another country may not give you the benefits that you want. So we need to be very careful on the alternative means of testing samples independently to take care of your own interest. The last comment is on the GMP inspection. You have noted a lot of variation in the nets, and we could borrow a lesson from the medicines that I think as countries we need to support our national regulatory agencies to conduct GMP inspections in this manufacturing companies' plants, rather to make sure that there is some compliance. Lastly is on the out of specification of the nets. You mentioned the height. I think the height was below even 150. And from my little experience about the net, when the height is very short, it's very hard to stretch the net. It cannot reach the bed. So if it can't reach the bed, it won't protect you against the mosquito. They will actually enter the net. So I do not know where the issue of shorter nets height is really coming from, and because we don't benefit from it. So it's either fitting the bed or not. I think this should really not be a very much stretched discussion. Thank you.
Yeah. Oh, lot of questions, odd questions are very difficult. But I will respond these questions. First question for why the Global Fund was insisted not to have the chemical analysis. Yes. Yeah. Yes, there was some confusion and so the disagreement, because when we see this such a big disagreement or fault in dimension of the bed, that the program suggested that we must go for the chemical analysis, because apparently what we are seeing, because the stitching quality was very poor, the zigzag like stitching, that's extra seams are, so that was very poor quality. When we communicated these findings to the Global Fund, to our donor, then there was a response was not in our favor. They said that these are the bed nets which have been supplied. And repeatedly, we insisted that we must go for the chemical analysis, but unfortunately, it was not agreed. But due to, I don't know why they were not agreed on the chemical analysis. Believe me, at one stage, when the third party was being sent to Pakistan, Crown Agent, it was communicated to the program, if your finding will not be true, we will charge the expense of this third party visit Pakistan $15,000 from your grant. But on the other side, program was such a confident that, okay, go ahead, send the inspectors. If we are not true, our findings are not true, you can charge the 15,000 from our grant. But when the third party came to Pakistan and our findings, they agreed that at least 50%, though there was some confusion, they mentioned more than 50% bed net out of specification. Then I asked the question to the third party inspector, Crown Agent, what do you mean by more than 50? It is the 51% or 99%? You must explain how much percentage according to your. So the things like that, but unfortunately, we repeatedly was said that no, a program cannot do the chemical analysis. Regarding, I linked this question with last question from this lady that program should do this. Yes, program try to do this analysis, but again, there was some pressure that if you will do, we will not accept the results. But due to certain reason, we have to stop this conversation because we don't want to make more conflict between the program and the donor, the things like that. We want to close this chapter because there was the BedNet was getting the closer expiry date, and there was a huge pressure that we should go. Despite the fact the program was not willing to distribute the BedNet without the chemical analysis, but due to certain reason, like in 2020 campaign, when there was a campaign conducted in some area where we need some extra bed net. And at that time, we have not made any inspection of these bed net, and we have to distribute 300,000 bed net from these faulty nets because at that time we have no analysis of these bed net. So due to certain even reason I can't understand why the donor was saying that you can't do the chemical analysis, the things like that. So answer, I have only this answer. Second, the Crown second inspector, chemicals is the same. Why we don't take this to OIG? This is a very difficult question. Yes, at one stage when we have the conversation with the donor, we both PRs were sitting in Pakistan and the donor, some of the Crown Agent and the other people were sitting over there. My higher boss suggested that, okay, if there is no agreement between the program and the donor, send this case to OIG. But again, donor didn't accept it. We have to settle ourselves. I'm sorry, I'm very open because the questions are very open. Then said, we can't take this to OIG. We want to settle this issue. Otherwise, yes, program. My boss, when he was sitting with me in a one conference call with the Global Fund, he suggested that, okay, if there is no settlement between the program and the donor, take this case to OIG. But again, unfortunately, it was not agreed. So out of specific, how did you, yeah, this is the same. Post-inspection, I think I have to answer this question because there are many questions which are related to each other. Yes, there was a question that why the regulatory authority should be involved in the inspection. Actually, what the mechanism we have in the country, that the program is fully authorized to have this inspection. Even in case even when I wrote the report for this inspection, and when I sent this report to Secretary Health, and Secretary Health, they put this signature agreed. So go ahead for the implementation of your recommendations. So that's why the program is fully confident, fully authorized to have this such inspection. Yes, you are very right that at such a stage of time, we should involve the regulatory authority. But I think the country, the regulatory authority doesn't have any role in this sort of issues. So program is fully authorized to have these such inspections. Yes, there are two questions regulatory. Yes, height, very important question. You mentioned your experience that the height is, yes. And this was my first impression because I was taking the lead of these inspections. my first impression was the wrong stitching of the side, because all the bed net have the bigger height than 150, even up to 180. Can you imagine 180 centimeter height of the bed net against the 150? And the width is 130, maximum width was 155. And when at the one stage of time, there was a debate that because we have the formula plus minus 7%, I said, statistically, this formula is valid when some bed net is more than 50%, 160 centimeter. Then we can say plus minus, because 100% bed net is less than 150. So how we can accept this formula? So this was actually one of my impression that is the wrong stitching of wrong side. So that's why the bed net has a very bigger height. So I think I have answered all the questions. If somebody missed question, Dr. Maha, I'm sure she want to add. She was the second champion of this inspection. So you want to say?
Thank you, Mukhtar Sahab. I just wanted to respond to Jessica point, if I correctly understood, regarding how much time they remain in the containers. So there were 7 containers, which was full of water, and they remained on the boat for 1.5 months. And when we received those containers in our warehouse and we opened it, and the gushes of water was coming out. So we immediately reported that. And after that, we also reported to insurance company. They came and they confiscated and they saw that. But luckily, we've made some videos. Unfortunately, we had deleted those videos from our devices, but they remain in the port for 1.5 months, full of water, while in the warehouse, still water is there.
And second, I think I missed your question that how much time is there any reading of the temperature and humidity? Unfortunately, we did not take any reading of the temperature, and because when the container was so wet, there are plenty of water inside, and there was no mean of taking the reading of the temperature, and that is actually is not included in our quality assurance mechanism. But after your comment, we will definitely include that. We will record the timing. Already their timing is there that we have over the months they were there, particularly wet bed net. But we will take the reading of the temperature and humidity at the time of arrival. Thank you for this comment. Finish? That's all.
Thank you, Dr. Muhammad. We have one question online, and I think it's directed to Levi. Is the number of ITN in brackets 30 really representative for the validity of the results? I think that's yours, Levi.
Yes, I think it is representative because this is something we did not do on our own. I feel I didn't mention the partners that were involved. This study is done in partnership with Vector Link and other PMI partners that we thought through the protocol well, and then we were able to arrive at this number. So it's valid. And then the population we're talking about is very small population. And so the results are valid in terms of representation of the number 30 that we use.
Thank you, David Gittleman, and I'll give Mohammed a break. Levi, great presentation. I did want to ask, you talked about program implications of these durability studies. I'd like to know maybe a little bit more clear what you as an NMCP are going to be doing with these data at this point, and what is it changing in your program going forward in the next few years?
Can you speak louder? Yeah.
Did you hear?
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, David Gittleman, sorry. wanted to know what, a little bit more clearly, what the program implications are of these studies that were conducted, because you mentioned program change potentially based on these results. What do you as an NMCP see these changes will be in the next 5 years, say?
Yeah, thank you very much. If you see how we transition from parietral UNE nets to RG2 nets, these were some of the findings that we had that led to some of the contributed to the decision that we made. And this study that is ongoing right now is very important because we did a nationwide distribution of RG2 nets. We are likely to repeat that in 2024. So this study is a precursor to what our next decision is going to be in terms of procuring for 2027. We've learned experience from Nigeria or from I think Malawi and other countries with who have completed the studies on the RG2 nets. And we continue to monitor the situation as well to see how it's going to inform our net ordering in terms of the type of nets and how it's going to impact our population. Yeah.
Thank you very much, Levi, for the answers. So we'll go to the third presentation for this morning, and we will have Angus Spear presenting on key findings from listening exercises with partners on post-market data collection. Thank you.
Thank you. See if the slides come up. So yeah, I'm going to talk a little bit about some of the work we've been doing recently with our partners at CHAI as well, talking to various stakeholders around some of the post-market activities and perspectives around that. But as a way to sort of contextualize that, I thought I'd start by just talking about this initiative that we've been involved in catalyzing, looking into net quality issues. And apologies for those of you who've seen this already, but I know a number of the countries have not seen these slides and maybe not aware of where this is coming from. So let's see if this works. No. There we go. Okay, so this is really just to show that, I mean, the issues around ITN quality have been bubbling away for quite some time now with various reports in the scientific press, even the news media, with various bits and pieces of information and data coming from these various sources. And one of the driving forces behind our work in this area is, really trying to identify, is there actually a problem, or what is that problem? What are the sort of root causes of this? To try and just sort of get some clarity on, well, if there are problems with nets, are there ways that we can look at them? Are there ways that we can address these to improve the useful life of nets? Get this thing the right way around. And this was shown yesterday, I think, in Emmanuel's presentation, but it just sort of highlights, this is modeling obviously done by Emilia Bertotti-Villa, but it just highlights the difference in the range of retention times of nets in different countries throughout the continent, and really just sort of highlights the issue quite graphically in terms of what we're doing. But what it doesn't do is really look at the underlying causes. This just shows retention times or models of retention times. But what are the issues here? Are there issues with the net, with the quality, or are there anthropological issues that also affect this as well? So to try and pull some of this apart, we've held two large convenings. The last one was about this time last year, actually, in Liverpool, right post-COVID. Some of you maybe have been there, but really trying to tease apart the issues and work with the broad stakeholder group to identify these root causes. And the way we've tried to separate this out because quality is a component of lots of intrinsic and extrinsic factors around that affect nets. So we've tried to tease this apart into 4 broad areas around the global policy and guidelines, which govern the quality of the nets and how they're used and where they're used, the manufacturing process, from the design of the products all the way through to manufacturing quality control, procurement, from tendering to shipment, and then the country management issues. So the post shipment quality assurance, storage distribution, household use, M&E, these kinds of activities. So just trying to contextualize these different factors that may affect ITN quality. And what we've tried to do as well is just try to tease apart what we're actually talking about here and be clear about what we're talking about when we say quality. And without wanting to get too much into dictionary definitions, it's quite clear that quality is a term that's used quite broadly when we're talking about ITNs. And there really is and this is going to be a lot clearer, I think, with the new pre-qualification ITN guideline that comes out. But there's a technical definition for quality and a common definition that we were hearing a lot coming back from various stakeholders. And really that technical definition is based around module 3 of the pre-qualification dossier, which is around the components of the net, its manufacturing processes, its specifications, and its physical characteristics. And nets that meet those specifications and those criteria and meet them consistent quality, they're produced to the quality that they're being asked to provide. What we often hear, though, is this more common definition of, are the nets actually doing what we expect them to do in the field? They're low quality nets. They're not lasting as long. Are they efficacious against the local mosquitoes? This kind of thing. And so we do want to be careful about what we're talking about here. And really, we've tried to pull this apart to say, meeting the technical definition of quality should infer the performance that we want to see, which is a net that's chemically active or producing or retaining chemically active insecticide on the surface for the 3 years and holding together for those 3 years physically. And so the big question here is really, does the technical definition of quality, the nets meeting these specifications, actually give the performance that we want to see? And it's not really clear whether that is the case in a lot of these cases. So this is a very busy slide. I mean, you're going to get this afterwards, but these were generally the outcomes from the convenings that we have, and just highlighting some of the main points here. The first one being there's a need to link the specifications to field performance. So do the specifications as they stand actually deliver the performance that we want to see? And that link is fairly unclear, and it's something that's being looked into more carefully now, particularly around the ITN guidelines. And we can talk about that later, but there are new, for example, specifications coming in around physical durability that should much better predict the durability of the fabric of the net and provide a much better means of assessing its ability to resist damage. Obviously, with the procurement, one thing that came up a lot, there's an emphasis of price over quality of nets. We've all seen the price of nets go down consistently over the years, and it's unclear what sort of effect that's had on the quality of the nets, where economies may have needed to be made. And there's also an issue around trust, and especially sharing information between different stakeholder groups. I think Mohammed outlined some very clear examples in his presentation around this sort of aspect, but it's something that keeps recurring in these conversations, and I think we've just had a very good example of it in Mohammed's presentation. So really, where we've landed on this is we're talking about raising the floor, because we want to bring nets, the quality of nets, up to a level that provides better performance more consistently in the various countries. Really with 5 aims: to stimulate innovation, validate methods, so making sure that we actually have methods that can accurately measure these products, either in terms of the specifications or as they're out in the field, maximizing the performance. So how can we use data to improve performance of the nets, either through the physical chemical properties of those nets or the usage practices that they're subjected to, ensuring quality, so making sure that nets are produced consistently, and building trust and data use. So these are the 5 main areas that we've come out as priorities in this initiative. And just to put this into some sort of context as well, again, it's quite a busy slide, but what we wanted to show with this really is this is all a continuum. This isn't just sort of a separate bunch of activities, and this all feeds into each other in terms of the life cycle of a net. From the yellow part there, stimulating innovation. So the design, the manufacturer, the development of new products through the R&D, development of specifications, and the whole manufacturing and quality control process there, to the country performance and the data that's collected there. At each of these cycles, there's opportunities to collect data, to bring data together, and to learn about how the nets are produced and how they're performing in the field. And that should feed into innovation. It should feed into performance improvement of these products, either through regulatory means, through product pre-qualification, or manufacturers off their own back, for example, just looking at their products in the field and looking at ways to improve performance. The key to a lot of this, though, is that bit in the middle, the purple bit, building trust through better transparent data. And again, I think we've seen from Hamid's presentation, you know, having data available and understanding what the data is telling you is a key component of building that trust. And it's not clear because data is being collected throughout the life cycle of a net. It's not really talking to each other, and it's not really available to those who need it at the time as they need it. And I think it's a really important part of this whole process is to improve on that aspect. So there is more trust in terms of, particularly with the programs being informed about, the nets that are coming in and the quality of those nets. So I'm just going to go quickly over an exercise we've been doing. We're partnering with CHAI on this to just get some general feedback from stakeholders. We've talked to various stakeholders group around post-market, and post-market is particularly interesting because it touches on all of these aspects, and it drives a lot of these aspects. And even though there's a whole lot of work that goes on before a net actually lands in a country, the post-market activities really help feed into every part of these in terms of learning more about the nets to help hopefully stimulate the innovation. You know, we need the methods to actually evaluate these products when they're in the field and to monitor them, and you've got to be able to measure whether their performance is actually as one would expect, and you've got to do that accurately. You've got to make sure that they're being used correctly to maximize their performance, making sure that the quality is there when they're coming in consistently. And again, the sort of data sharing aspect. So post-market is a crucial part of all of this process, and it feeds into all of these areas. So what we did briefly was we've had a whole series of calls with various stakeholder groups, and I'm just going to talk about generally the feedback we've had from the countries here rather than with these other groups who talk to implementers, procurers, manufacturers as well. But really just having conversations around 3 main questions, looking at the decisions that are made around post-market data, what data is available, and what data is actually needed to help make better decisions about these nets in countries. And one of the ways we've tried to, well, this is sort of developed over time, but what we're really trying to get at here again is thinking about that quality and performance aspect. And post-market really happens, you know, after a product leaves the factory. So this does include, for example, pre-distribution inspections, which is really quality data. And so trying to make sure that the data that's collected on quality is just that and not interpreted on performance, for example. And so thinking about the way that the data is generated, who has access to it, and what it's used for is a key part of this and the post-market side of it. So just in terms of some very high-level points, I don't want to read off all of these, but maybe I'll just pick out a few. But in terms of quality monitoring, what we've heard pretty consistently from countries is the need to, or a desire to have clearer and more consistent quality data before products land in the country. And this happens, it doesn't happen consistently, let me say, from what we're hearing. And you know, and this can help, or having this data available can help, for example, registrations, getting things through customs, whatever it may be, and also just sort of building confidence in the products that are coming in. And yeah, I think Mohammed talked about this as well. This notion that the ranges that we have on some of the specifications are pretty broad. And again, consistently coming back and from some of these conversations is the need for much clearer specifications around this and narrower ranges so that you don't get so much variability on these aspects. Also, shelf life comes back pretty consistently, or expiry dates. Just on that, I mean, I agree with Jessica. I don't think it should be such an issue, but it's clear that some guidance is needed, and pre-qualification have heard this, and they have said that they're coming up with guidance around shelf life and expiry dates to help make that messaging more consistent and to help countries interpret that better. In terms of data collection, you know, talking to countries, a lot of this obviously focuses around their performance in the field, so durability monitoring. I mean, I think by now all countries are aware of the issues with nets and their retention in the countries. And you know, obviously this is suboptimal in a lot of places, but there's an almost universal desire to do some form of monitoring. Durability monitoring is the tool that people are most familiar with, but looking at the retention and the life in the field. And I know there's lots of questions and discussions around durability monitoring and the fact it can be very expensive, but it's the tool that we have right now. And there's a strong desire from countries to use it, or to collect the data of how the products are performing in the field. And this is driven by this is driven a lot by, I think, awareness of the fact that nets are performing differently in different countries in terms of retention times. So wanting to understand the causes of attrition or retention in their own countries, I think, is a very reasonable aspiration. I think data collection on IT and quality and performance is often fragmented. We heard a lot that, you know, often the data is collected by different groups or universities or whatever, and it's not consistently shared, it's not consistently analyzed. And I think there's a lot that can be done around how we package that information and put it in context as well, I think, with data coming in from other countries as well. There's also, and I'm really pleased to hear this from coming back from the countries, a general recognition that we need to expand our knowledge about usage practices and user information. We can point the finger at a net and say, well, this net isn't lasting for 3 years, but if it's being used unreasonably, or even if it's just used a lot, I mean, these things can, they're not designed to withstand unreasonable use. And so understanding how they're being used, what are the drivers for attrition, I think is a really important part of this, because you can't just expect a net to be lasting 3 years if it's not being used appropriately. And understanding what those drivers are, I think, is a really important part of this. And I don't think we're going to get consistently 3-year nets without addressing this, because the net can only go so far in terms of its physical characteristics. Last slide. So just some general comments. Sorry, Corinne's just come up with a question. Yeah, so just some general comments. I think there is a need to keep countries informed about developments in this space, particularly the new pre-qualification ITN guidelines, which are going to set out, well, they're going to update the requirements for data for pre-qualification, and that dossier is going to look very different from a HOOPI's recommendation. I think as well, when we're talking about specifications, there's going to be a much clearer look at them, and they're going to be less flexible, let me say, and more defined in terms of changes that can be made to specifications without notifying WHO. So I think that's going to tighten up quite a lot, but it's going to be really important that countries understand this. And I think as well as part of these guidelines, there's going to be a whole glossary of terms and definitions, which will help really outline what the data is telling us and how we can be interpreting that information. I think, again, in this second point here around the CAPA, the corrective and preventive actions, I think a better understanding of that and how that is managed and what that process is, and involving countries in that process in a more balanced way, I think is something that keeps coming back. And I think Mohammed has sort of talked about that again. Sorry, I keep coming back to you, Mohammed. But I think he's talked about that. And, you know, I think there's a real need to sort of align expectations around what the country's requirements are, what the donors' requirements are. And I'm not saying where that line should be drawn, but I just think that there is work to be done there in terms of elucidating that process. I think there's better need for a better interpretation of data. What we do hear quite a lot as well is when we're talking about quality and performance, it's very much to do with the net and its physical chemical characteristics. It's not really to do with whether it's effective against local mosquitoes, for example, because that's the efficacy of the product in the country. And these things often get conflated because we use similar assays to look at these things. And so when we're talking about, you know, what the net is and how we define it, I think we have to separate that from the sort of efficacy issues and how the net is, or whether the net is able to be effective against local mosquitoes, as just one example of this. And there have been a number of requests for guidance and communication around proper net use and care. And I think that really speaks to the anthropological data that needs to be looked at in the countries. So there is a lot to be done. I think there's a lot to be done around improving understanding and bringing countries together with procurers, with manufacturers, to actually understand where these different perspectives are, and trying to align expectations a lot more clearly than maybe has been in the past, particularly now as quality has become quite the hot button issue for nets, and obviously is becoming, we're all becoming much more aware of what some of these drivers for the performance that we're seeing are. And so there's going to need to be a lot of communication and I guess development of mutual understanding to help alleviate some of these issues. So that's just a very quick presentation around that. I'll say thank you and answer any questions.
Thank you so much, Angus. Indeed, we really need to raise the floor in order to strengthen ITN quality and performance. We are going to take some questions from the presentation before we break for coffee. We'll start from this end.
Thanks for the presentation, Angus. Well, there was one point that you highlighted from the feedback that there was a need for clearer quality related data. And I was wondering what that refers to, whether or not it's an understanding of the actual results or a sense of a need for a greater understanding of the methodology that's used to produce those results. Could you elaborate on that, please?
Thanks for the presentation, Angus. I understood that country have expressed a need of clear data product. I think I'd like to know if the use of QR code on I-10 can't be a game changer to help countries to access to clear data product during use of net on ground. Thanks.
My name is Duncan and my question goes to Angus. My question is on post-market surveillance. What would be the distinguishing factors between post-market surveillance and durability monitoring? Considering durability monitoring is not frequently conducted due to it being viewed as being expensive, what would really distinguish this, and who would own the process? Would it be the country or would it be the donors?
Good morning. My name is Patrick Sees from Vestergaard. A question really to all three of you, but specifically to Angus. Thank you very much for drawing attention to these issues. I think it's absolutely important that we discuss post-market surveillance. I think there's a clear need for a more systematic, routine post-market surveillance, one that is country-led and country-owned. We've certainly seen in the past few years quite a number of substandard nets that are being distributed in countries that are actually only found once they have arrived in country. So I have a couple of questions. So on post-market surveillance data, perhaps you can help me understand where does it reside? Who is that data shared with? And should the data confirm that nets are out of specification or have quality issues or lower than acceptable performance, who acts on it? And then we've understood from Pakistan that the issue is when the nets arrive in country. So a number of issues over the last couple of years indicate an issue with pre-shipment inspections. So perhaps you could speak to that as well. Thank you.
You want to get yours in, Rune, and then I'll answer.
Thanks. Basically, just expanding a bit on Patrick's comment. I think as a manufacturer, we get very little post-marketing data back. I think the only thing we really get in a systematic fashion from PMI, which is great with these durability monitoring reports. But otherwise, we get very little back. And I think also the case from Pakistan illustrates that apparently it's hard to even get just post-shipment data back. So as a manufacturer, so to address the quality issue or to drive product improvement becomes very difficult when we sort of lose sight of our products just at the factory gate. Thanks.
Thanks. So I'll try and answer all of these. I'm sorry, I missed the second question. So if you could get the microphone to the person who asked that second question, I go back to them and I'll answer that at the end. So to Chris, clear quality related data, I think it's sort of a catch-all comment for just and I think it talks to what Rune is saying and what Patrick's saying as well. Really just about I think that was really thinking about, for example, pre-distribution inspection data. Where does that, how is that available? Is that available consistently to countries? And I think this is important, I think, in terms of the trust building exercise, for example, because if you can trust that data and know that the products are coming out of a factory within specification, whatever it may be, hopefully that would lessen the need or build the trust in the product that's coming out and lessen the need for all sorts of or post-shipment testing. So it's that sort of thing, the transparency and the availability of the data consistently. And I know some countries get this, some countries don't, but I think it's also, and if I jump to Rune's question here, and I think we forget the manufacturers quite a lot. And I know all the manufacturers do things differently, and some do look at post-market data off their own back, others less so. But also, I think when data is being produced, what is that feedback loop to the manufacturers as well? Because if there are performance issues or if there are quality issues, they obviously need to know. And what you don't want to do is have things build up over a long time, and then suddenly there's a surprise waiting from some sort of investigation. So I think that is actually a really important part. And often manufacturers do get left out of the thinking here, and we're trying to make sure that they have a voice in this and are included as well. So the question around post-market surveillance and durability monitoring and the differences between the two, I would see durability monitoring as one of the tools that could be employed for post-market surveillance. And post-market surveillance really should encompass the sort of quality and the performance data that that is collected, post manufacture for these products. And durability monitoring is just a tool to do that, which has obviously been carried out in a number of countries now, and there's a demand for this. But there's also a realization that it is somewhat expensive to carry out on a continuous basis. And so really looking at, are there other tools or are there other ways we can look at that sort of data collection to make it more feasible for routine application to nets coming into countries. So Patrick, who owns data? Yeah, well, where does data reside, and who owns and actions it? Well, it's a really good question, and I think one of the problems that we've seen is that data resides in different places. I mean, it's generated and it doesn't really talk to each other. So it's very difficult to build up a question. And for example, me trying to get data is reaching out to all sorts of people, different types of stakeholders, to try and build up a picture of everything. And so it is quite difficult. Now, obviously, some of this data is quite sensitive when it pertains to the quality aspects, but it's also, I think if we're going to build trust in the data and in the products, we have to, or we should be making a lot of this more available. And I think if you look at, for example, the rapid diagnostic tests, what drove quality improvement for RDTs quite effectively was the fine WHO reports, which just put out the testing every year of RDTs quite plainly, and we saw that there were some awful ones there, and much better ones as well. And that's it was a very I was going to say blunt tool, but it was a very blatant way of doing it, but it actually drove the performance improvement in the market. And I think it's, something similar might be appropriate for ITNs as well. Obviously very different products, but the ethos of that transparency, I think, would be very helpful. I think that's all the questions. Now, where was that question to? Sorry, I missed. Do you have the microphone? Pardon?
Thanks. Okay, it's with the use of QR code attached to a net.
Mhm.
Yes, just to register the data about the net and afford it on the ground during the use by scanning the QR code. Thanks.
Yeah, I think it's a really interesting and potentially useful tool to, because with the QR code, you can obviously load in a lot of different information or more information about the product on there. And I think it's one of the tools that maybe we could be looking at to link to quality data and sort of talk to Patrick's point, where does this information reside and how can we make it more available as well? So I think it's potentially a really useful tool to improve the sort of transparency and availability of quality data for those products. Oh, yeah, but I didn't see the question from Karina online, so hopefully someone's got it.
I think Dr. Ma, please go ahead, and then I'll ask.
It's not a question, it's just a comment, specifically for durability monitoring. And in Pakistan scenario, and not only the Pakistan scenario, and new climate change scenario, flood is new normal. So if the bed nets earlier in a normal situations and in flood situations and in water situations, so while assessing durability, we have to keep this factor in. Thank you.
We have one more question from our online viewers. Is there a plan in place for the post-market work done by innovation to impact on ITN quality to feed into the WHO PQ specification and guidelines for pre-qualification of ITNs? The new draft WHO ITN guidelines do not seem to cover post-market performance.
Yes, so the simple answer is yes. I mean, we're already working very closely with pre-qualification and have had a lot of input into the guidelines already, just with some of the things that we've been working on longer term. So for example, physical durability, it was work that actually Hannah and started under a former PMI grant. And we're sort of helping bring that through and get them into the specifications. But in terms of post-market specifically, that section on the ITN guideline is pretty open, and that's I do think that the pre-qualification want to fill that out, but they're focusing on the other parts of it. So what we're working on them with is if we can give them a head start on that. So this exercise around discussing with stakeholders, these listening exercises, is really with an aim to start pulling together a vision for what a post-market system could look like, and the types of data that could be collected, and I think as well roles and responsibilities within that, and that really talks to Patrick's point as well about who has the responsibility to act on these sorts of things. And I think one of the big questions that comes up quite consistently around this is, what is the trigger for action by either procurers or pre-qualification to investigate something or to look more deeply into it? And so obviously that is their purview, but the idea of this work and the next phase of this work is to really start pulling together that vision. And that's why it was so important to just get these different perspectives, because we can talk about post-market data broadly, but it is so there's such a range of stakeholders that are involved who all want different things out of the data, because their role is very specific within that. And so you can't just come up with a one-size-fits-all approach to this. It's got to be something that is responsive to the needs and the roles of those stakeholders within the life cycle of a net. Jimmy.
I would like to propose, I did not know that once airlines get PQ, that is it. And we are then going to rely on their internal controls, receiptment, and the rest. As you said, for RDTs, every 2 years, the PDS scores are done independently, and those which fit within 80% score onwards are listed. To avoid what we have seen with Pakistan, and also other countries have seen, except we have not been that keen. I think there has to be a mechanism for regularly validate production quality processes. That's number one. Number two, I think the raising the flow project needs to put up maybe a database or a repository where we can all share this performance data, because almost every country now is doing, and the Global Fund, even in the current concept note, has encouraged us to provide money for it, and expertise has grown. So that, like earlier, when was it called the IR mapper? All sorts of people doing resistance studies on pyrethroids put the data there, and then a map was developed for everyone to see. I think let's make a mechanism where we can put this data in one place for everyone to see. What we have seen here is very informative, and I can see Liberia, the nets are performing much better there than maybe because is it one particular product? We are observing very, very different, much less performance than what you have reported. Because at the moment, the only mechanism for sharing people have is to publish or share in conferences, where it is so limited. It's an abstract, and very few things really come out. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Jimmy. I'll just respond briefly. In terms of pre-qualification, I mean, obviously don't speak for pre-qualification, but as I understand it, the idea is that the products that are pre-qualified will be regularly reassessed. The thing is as well with the way that pre-qualification will look at them, companies will have to notify pre-qualification much more routinely about changes that are made to a net. The previous specifications under HOOPIES were incredibly broad. And so, changes could be made without informing HOOPIES, or HOOPIES would not record them, would probably be a more accurate way of talking about it. For example, the specification for a binder on a net was, is there a binder? Not what it is, why it's there, how it's formulated, anything like that, what it's doing. It's just, is there a binder, yes or no? So you could change that binder around if you wanted to, and HOOPIES wouldn't record it. So that sort of change and those sorts of changes will be recorded. And if there is a material change to the performance of the product, then the product is going to have to be reassessed by pre-qualification. So that it will be much more, I was going to say difficult, but much more controlled product variations, and they will be noted, and it will be easier to track products modifications over time. That's the idea. But and I know a number of manufacturers who've said to me that they're always talking to pre-qualification about modifications, changes, this kind of thing, just to make sure that they're noted and just to make sure that they are pre-qualification are informed of what is going on. The database, I absolutely agree. Whether it's I2I, or I would prefer it if there was an existing database we could build on, or a system that we could build on. For example, the QR system might be a good way of having a access to these sorts of things. But I do think we need to have some sort of database, and I think IAMAPA is a really good example of how that kind of, it was almost a sort of collaborative community effort and brought together by Vestigard, I believe, wasn't it? So but it was an incredibly useful tool that pulled together the resistance data. So I think, again, that kind of approach would be really helpful. The thing with something like that for nets, I mean, for insecticide resistance, I mean, it's here is the resistance, this is the level of resistance. For nets, it's about what data will be there and how that will be interpreted. And this is why we need to have definitions very clear. Sorry, this is why we need to have definitions very clear when we're sort of sharing the data, so that the data isn't misinterpreted when it's up there.
Thank you so much, Angus. Let us give a loud applause to our presenters today. I think they've done an awesome job. Thank you so much, gentlemen. We really appreciate that. We are behind on time a little bit, but we'll try and catch up in the next session. We're going to take a 10 minutes break. Because we are behind on schedule, I would like to request that we pick our coffee and come back with it in the room and be here at exactly 11:05. We have lined up some more interesting presentation. So enjoy your coffee break, and thank you. Comes data for decision making. I would like to request the presenters for this session to come up. We have Aneta Vajinska from Global Fund. We have Joris Likwela Sandru and Emmanuel Rukwenga from Grade 3. Please come up. Our first presentation after the coffee break will be by Aneta Vajinska, and she will be talking about transitioning from input to output-based funding. pilot studies from DRC, South Sudan, and Pakistan. Thank you. Welcome.
Hello, everyone. Can I ask you to please sit down? Unfortunately, if you don't hear the beginning of my presentation, you won't understand the end of it. So I really welcome you to sit down. Before I begin, let me just introduce myself. My name is Aneta Wierzyńska. I work at the Global Fund, and I span several teams. I work in the health system strengthening team. I used to work in the risk team. And before that, I was a fraud investigator in the OIG. Okay. So I'm here to share with you, but also more importantly, to ask you, what can the Global Fund do to make it easier? Let me say that again. What can the Global Fund do to make it easier for you to do your job? Now, before we go further, I'd like you to take a pen and a piece of paper, and I'd like you to think through the two top things that drive you crazy when you do your job using Global Fund money. Please go ahead. Take your time. If you could wish away two things, two barriers, pick one. What do we as the Global Fund do to make your ability to deliver quality mass campaigns harder? Ready? I'm not going to put any of you on the spot because, as I understand from one of your colleagues sitting here, it's not very nice to criticize a donor. So I won't ask you to tell me out loud in this meeting, but I do very much welcome you to come to me during break and please share. Because the only way we can fix the way we do things is if you tell us honestly what we need to do differently. What we've been doing for the last couple years is trying to figure that out with a specific set of countries that have a particular problem. And that problem is that the supporting documentation that the financial people require and the auditors require under the Global Fund rules to make sure that that supporting documentation does not generate ineligible payments. It seems everyone is focusing a lot on that documentation, and it's causing slowdowns of mass campaigns. Yes, I see nodding. Any other nods? Can I see nods? Thank you. And you work so hard to get all those invoices right and all those procurement documents right. And then inevitably something's missing or something's wrong. And you still have that LFA coming through and you still end up with ineligibles. Or even more, you get my former colleagues, the investigators or auditors coming through. Yeah? Is this sounding familiar? So we've been working on how do we fix that? How do we actually focus everybody, including the fiduciary oversight functions, on what matters? What matters in a mass campaign at the end of the day? What matters? People get bed nets. Malaria goes down. People get bed nets. That's what matters. And that's what should be the first and foremost question that we ask of you and that you ask of anyone who's delivering those nets. So after having done several pilots, and my colleague Juris will actually tell you about one because he's been actually running this on the ground, we have actually decided that we can actually do better by changing the rules. Let me show you what I mean. I don't know why that's done this way, so I'm gonna just put all of this on the board. Okay. So right now, the Global Fund's rules, when you sign a Global Fund grant, they say to you, I don't care how you plan, how you do your activities, what your outputs are. You need to show us that you did proper financial management. And if you do it right, you get to keep the money. If you don't do it right, you have to pay us back. Yes? Which means that when you're giving, what we do is we say, if you show me complete and compliant procurement and expenditure documentation, you can keep your money. We're going to give you all the money up front. You show us expenditure documents and you can keep the money. What we're finding is that this dynamic is driving a lot of barriers. It's actually getting in the way of focusing on programmatic performance. It's also generating a lot of what I call false fraud. Generating documentation to look compliant, which is actually not very reliable anyway. So what I'd like to talk to you about is a concept called payment for results. This is a very, very technical and unique term for something that you will recognize as service delivery contracting. Okay, it's just service delivery contracting. But the Global Fund likes its own name, so we're going to call it payment for results. So we've decided to start introducing a payment for results or service delivery contracting modality and allow for that in grants. That's my big message to you today. What that means is, and it doesn't matter if you're doing mass campaigns or if you're doing any other intervention, okay? It's intervention neutral. You can decide what you're going to actually, what matters along your results chain. And you actually set up a contract to pay against what you decide programmatically matters. By doing this, what you're also doing, very importantly, is you're delinking this mechanism, which means when the Global Fund auditors or LFA come to you and say, show me you spent the money correctly from a financial management standpoint, you don't have to show them the procurement documents. You don't have to show them the invoices, okay? You show them the evidence that you defined is relevant to your programmatic delivery. What that therefore means is instead of saying, here, show me, I'll give you all the money and show me all your invoices, what we're saying is you can start talking to each other as, I will give you a partial advance. You provide me evidence of having delivered that programmatic milestone that you care about. And then I'll give you the rest of the money or you get to keep the money. Okay? Simple. This is how the whole world does business, except for us. So we're going to start joining the rest of the world. Okay, what does that mean for a mass campaign? Well, this is, again, Joris will speak to this. You'll see this wonderful photo here. This is my favorite photo of all times. This is what managing a mass campaign seems to look like under the old model. In fact, my favorite quote of this whole engagement was, in the DRC, we move more paper than nets. Does that sound familiar? Amen. Okay, why? Because contractually, like I explained to you in the previous slide, this proving that you have handed out per diems, that you've contracted travel, that you have hired the right catering service for your trainings. Proving all of this documentation was spent correctly, that's how you get to keep your money as a PR. Yeah? Under a service delivery contract or a payment for results, or as it was called under the previous grant cycle, because now all the names keep changing, we called it an activity-based contract. Same thing, different names. What we did is we sat down with Marcy, mostly with Marcy, and with Joris, and said to Marcy and Joris, what does a good campaign look like? How do you define success in a campaign? And they said, everybody here knows the answer, coverage. Okay, so let's pay for coverage. Easy. And then, there were some other conversations like, oh, we don't really know if our workforce is trained. And if our workforce isn't trained to use the ODK, then they won't do the campaign. So let's actually identify a midpoint deliverable that way. Also, this was a way to get our financial people happy because they felt there was a lot of fraud there. So we said, okay, we'll check that. Okay. And then of course, this is a shout out to our colleagues from sourcing. There are bed nets coming through. We want to make sure that we get them accounted for because those are assets that are valuable. So let's add a deliverable here. This is one model of an activity-based contract for mass campaigns. I personally trust that it's quality from a programmatic standpoint. Why? Because the PNLP, Sunru, and AMP said so. Programmatic people need to define what deliverables should exist. It is your job as programmatic people, as programmatic experts, to define that. Oh, I'm going to fall off. Okay, so what does that mean? Well, what we were aiming for, and I'd like you to go back to your piece of paper that you wrote at the beginning, okay? What could you wish away? Well, we had a lot of objectives in trying this model. And they weren't only to speed up the campaigns. That was one, and Joris will talk about that. But what we were actually aiming for is a contracting model where incentives are aligned to achieve many different dimensions of success. Because the truth is, in our world, it's not good enough just to get the programmatic aspects right. You also have to get the sustainability aspects right, the value for money aspects right, and the fiduciary aspects right. And only by addressing all four can you really say, okay, this on balance, this model is better than the previous model, the status quo. Okay, so I think we will tell you concretely about the benefits that we saw in the DRC on mass campaigns. I can tell you, I see every single one of these objectives we achieved with this model, every single one. So let me read you what they are. We had a problem with delayed campaigns. We improved the timeliness. We had a problem where the Global Fund was micromanaging every decision. We gave implementers flexibility. We had a problem where we were focusing too much on the paperwork, on the invoices, and not enough on performance managing the campaign. We were able to focus on the implementers were able to focus on performance managing the campaign. We were not sure whether our programmatic coverage data was actually reliable. We strengthened the verifications to increase the reliability of our programmatic data. We wanted to make sure that we're actually reaching all the households. We fixed the verifications to make sure that that is in fact verified. From a sustainability standpoint, we wanted to actually engage the ministry and the local officials in an ownership over the campaigns. The dynamic, because they got paid only when they delivered, generated more ownership. It also generated more accountability. We actually involved community-based organizations to perform the LQAS to see coverage. So we actually engaged the community in verifying the campaign. So we got community engagement. And we'll see, but we think we're getting closer to building some sustainability on this, but that one's a little of an open long-term question. The biggest question that I had, because I come from a fiduciary perspective, is can we improve the operational efficiency? Meaning, how much of your staff time, of your teams, how much of your people are doing useful work to generate the campaign delivery, or how much of this is compliance work? Checking papers to check papers to check papers to check papers. And we did in fact find enormous amounts of operational inefficiency. The piece that I think is most interesting, and I've done this analysis in many countries, is I find that actually a lot of the programmatic folks in your teams, I don't know if this is true for you, they're actually supporting the accountants on the financial side to make sure that the compliant documentation is generated as opposed to doing their real job, which is programmatic oversight and data quality checking. So we improved the controls, meaning checking the right stuff. And we actually looked ahead of time on whether the actual campaign is priced correctly. We stopped believing that we can actually achieve genuinely competitive procurements. We simply evaluated the market price up front. We made credible assumptions. We locked in the price, and that's it. And we increased the absorption of the funds by making the funding the process simpler. And we strengthened the fraud controls, not because we got rid of fraud, please. As a fraud person, I can tell you, we focused on the fraud that is the most harmful to mass campaigns. Very different question. We're not talking about eliminating fraud. We're talking about targeting fraud and corruption, which leads to under delivery of the campaign or unreliable programmatic data. That's serious fraud from a programmatic perspective. You want to make sure you address that. So that's what we focused on. And we decreased the number of ineligibles. I spent a lot of time on this slide because the question I want to ask you on that slide is any of this ringing true for you? If so, please talk to me after the search session. So the DRC, we have actually 3 models that have been under development in doing service delivery contracting in 3 different countries. We have our colleagues from Pakistan here who've been helping us with that, and South Sudan. So you can see these are not easy environments. These are actually really challenging environments. And I think that's what I want to say, that the solution that I'm talking about here is not something that you have to wait for until you have a functional system. If you have a functional system, you don't need this solution. Okay, it's the opposite. This is for making your life easier where it's hard already. So, you know, we have what I want to show you here in these 3 models is the diversity in which you can structure these things. You're not bound to do it the way we did it in the DRC. In the DRC, we structured the service delivery contract or the payment for results between a subrecipient, which was an INGO, and the health zone authorities, which is 2 layers down the pyramid. We did that intentionally because these guys were the ones that we wanted to actually get to start being accountable. Okay. But as you can see in Pakistan, the contract is between the MOH and a hospital network and the NGO, which is functioning as a service provider. It's a different model. It's between PR and SR. And here in South Sudan, we even tried a UN agency. That was hard. They'll get there. Anyway, deliverables. This is the domain of programmatic experts here. So as you can see in Congo, we paid for coverage, workforce trained and accounting for nets. In Pakistan, we tried including micro planning. You know, as you can see, coverage will always be there. Yeah, nets will always be there. You can mix things around depending on what needs you have. Basically, the point is when you're drafting a service delivery contract, you have 2 questions. What do I mean by programmatic success? And what are my bottlenecks where I want to drive more accountability? And that's how you decide what your deliverables are. In South Sudan, this one, we came in a little late to the game for advice, to giving advice. So they actually had an overly simplistic, but the problem here is that they didn't get rid of the requirement to produce the compliant invoices. So that's not really helping them much. That's just creating, not really replacing. And the idea is you want to replace, not add more requirements, right? Because you want to simplify and give flexibility. So, you know, the fundamental point is that we always added a verifier and we had technology. I understand that many of you are probably running service delivery contracting already. You're probably running tenders and you're structuring service delivery contract for nets anyway. Great. I think we're probably all on the same page. What I can tell you is there's a few traps that if you don't tell the Global Fund you're doing it, you could end up in. And we are working hard to actually help prevent these traps for you and to help you sort of have success in terms of well-designed contracts, efficient processes, and critically manage your audit risk at the back end. Okay. So the traps that we can help you avoid are, first of all, that your LFA and auditor need to understand that you've structured this contract this way, because otherwise they'll continue asking for the supporting documentation, the inputs. So they need to be told and to tell them you actually need waivers from the grant agreement. The PR and the country team need to actually create a contractual term for that. Also, what we've noticed is very often when you are contracting for a service delivery contract, because you're afraid of the ineligibles from the Global Fund, you don't remove the requirement for the invoicing and the procurement documents. I call that double trouble. You've actually increased your risk of ineligibles rather than decreasing it. The whole purpose of doing it this way is to remove your requirement of the invoices and the procurement documents. Okay. So again, this is important in your contract to structure that. And you actually have to structure that in your tender at the RFP stage already. Okay. You might choose the wrong deliverables. Very often people are risk averse, so they add more and more and more and more deliverables. More is not better necessarily. What's more important is this point here, the verification model. Most often I see structured contracts where the service provider gets paid based on what they tell you they delivered. That's not reliable. It's just not. It's self-reporting. From an auditor standpoint, that is a huge fraud risk. You need to think through an independent verification method and pay against the verification results, not the self-reported results. Big trap. And obviously you have a situation where there will be risks. They're mostly financial risks that come along this model. And if you put them forward to the Global Fund up front, we can actually take a risk acceptance decision, which means when an auditor finds the problem, if they do, it won't generate an ineligible because we accepted the risk up front. I'm going to go much faster now because I know I need to finish time, but we do have a corporate policy that is about to be approved that I've been drafting for the last couple months to systematize this approach. So this becomes fully systematic for the Global Fund implementers. Basically, you're going to be asked to go through a conceptualization of your model, design, and then operationalize. And at each point, there's a small step of review and approval. Okay. The requirements for how to develop these things under the policy are here. They're very common sense. You need to have a good reason. You need to choose the right, I put outputs, but results or deliverables. You need to set up the right payment terms. You need to structure the right implementation arrangement. You need to create a verification model. And then you need to say what risks trade-offs you had. And then we need to set up the audits correctly for you. So what we look for a triangulation of information. The service provider is not the one who actually gives us information, you don't pay against the service provider, you pay against a verifier. In the case of a mass campaign, it's usually an LQAS to figure out coverage. And also the other thing we look for is a contract. Obviously, you'll be generating a contract, service delivery contract, where you have the actual deliverable, the evidence that the service provider needs to provide for the deliverable, what the verification method is per deliverable, the payment terms, and the financial value. And then and I can talk to this later, but we will actually change the audit terms of reference to fit that. So the LFA and the annual auditor will not be asking for input documents. They will be asking for proof of what you wrote in that contract. Now, if you're interested, this is my second to last slide. When do you need to get started? You're in the process, most of you, of starting new grant cycles. You're probably in the process of detailed budgeting. Because you can structure a payment for results model between the Global Fund and the PR. It probably doesn't make sense to start there. is my learning, because you want to just get your operational systems correct and set everybody up to be working under a payment for results model sort of in the first grant cycle. If you then want to actually structure the whole grant that way, you can go in the second grant cycle. But I wouldn't recommend doing that immediately. So if you're actually planning to actually do a service delivery contract, or PFR below the PR level, you don't actually have to start at grant making, because you can structure that and run the RFPs and all that once grant implementation starts. Yeah, but you do have to think about setting up your detailed budget to make sure that happens. And here are a few traps that I see that haven't been thought through. First of all, if you have, you need to think through your technology needs. The more you can use technology, the better the more efficient your process is. Second is you need to budget for your verifications. You must budget for LQASs, okay, and a DQA. You have to, because that's what you're going to basically be paying against in a mass campaign. You want to think through your HR resources, whether you have the right resources set up to validate the performance. And you might want technical assistance to help out. We have a colleague here. Melissa, could you raise your hand, please? Show everybody. It's Melissa. She's been working with us on the ground, and they help the implementers rewire their HR and structure the contracts correctly. So the other point I wanted to make is that when you go into actually designing a service delivery contract, you're going to design it, you're going to get it approved, you're going to document it and tender for it. And then you'll actually select your service provider. You really want to get your design of the PFR and get the approval before you start your tender. We've made that mistake before. So how can we help you? Well, we have a whole, like I said, a policy is coming out, but we actually just have like operational tools that we've set up over the last couple of years that are at your disposal. So what do we have? We have roadmaps and work plans. We have a standardized tool that helps you think through all the steps so you don't miss a step. We have TA providers who can help you if you need them. We have dedicated Global Fund staff who's actually done this before and can help out. We work with the country teams, but we're actually above the country teams in the second line functions. So we can facilitate engaging all the other departments to actually facilitate approval and review quickly. Okay, thanks to AMP, we now have standard LQAS and DQA protocols that you can actually use that AMP can furnish. We do have identified already the standard waivers for the grant agreement terms and conditions. So you can actually quickly adjust the grant agreement, legally speaking. We also have template TORs for LFAs and auditors. So I think that's an end-to-end. And I look forward to hearing from you all in copies if you have any questions or interest. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Aneta. We will skip the discussion, the Q&A for now. We'll have it at the end of the presentation. It is my pleasure to welcome Joris from Sandro to come and make a presentation.
Merci beaucoup. Bonjour tout le monde. Alors, je vais... Alors, je m'appelle Joris Liquela. Je travaille avec 100 rue Asbel depuis 4 ans maintenant, après avoir été 4 ans et demi directeur de programme du PNLP en RDC. Et donc, je vais vous parler des campagnes sous approche ABC en RDC, designées avec l'appui de Aneta, de Marcy et Insiglio Palladium. Et donc, je vais essayer de vous résumer un petit peu ce que nous avons pu obtenir comme résultat. Et donc, ma présentation... OK. Alors, ma présentation va s'articuler autour des 6 points. Je commence par dire pourquoi est-ce que nous, on a voulu faire cette nouvelle approche en RDC. qu'est-ce qui change par rapport à ce que nous faisions avant? Et puis, quels sont nos livrables contractuels? Et comment nous avons fait les arrangements des paiements par rapport à l'échange de ces livrables? Et qu'est-ce que nous avons obtenu? Et puis après, je vais faire une petite comparaison avec les campagnes qui sont restées en mode standard, parce que nous avons continué à avoir ces deux types de campagnes, ce qu'on faisait avant et l'approche ABC. Et donc, alors la RDC, c'est un pays où le paludisme est vraiment un problème de santé tel que c'est 12% des cas et des décès du monde qui sont en RDC. Et donc, si la RDC et les Nigeria arrivent à contrôler le paludisme, je crois que nous allons tous sourire dans cette salle. Et donc, tout le monde a le regard tourné vers la RDC et vers les Nigeria. Et nous savons par ailleurs que pour contrôler les paludismes, la prévention est capitale. Et la prévention, avec l'utilisation des moustiquaires, est un élément clé. Et pour y arriver, il faut des campagnes pour amener rapidement la couverture à un niveau très élevé et puis ensuite maintenir pour avoir l'impact. Cependant, ces campagnes-là ont des soucis dans la mise en œuvre. Chez nous, nous avons noté qu'il y avait beaucoup de temps perdu pour revenir sur une province, parce que nous faisons des campagnes province par province, parce que chaque province chez nous, ça fait 2-3 pays ailleurs. Hein. Alors, donc, on fait province par province, mais pour revenir sur une province, on revient généralement 4 à 5 ans après. Lorsque les moustiquaires, vous avez vu, on a beaucoup discuté de la durabilité sur terrain. Les moustiquaires sont déjà inutilisables et déclassés. Et alors, nous revenons en comptant nos morts. Alors, rien que le délai que nous prennent le temps de vérification des procédures, des passations de marché, des factures, ça prend énormément du temps dans ces temps de préparation. Alors, rien que la sélection des prestataires pour les transports, les salles, ça nous prend 3 à 5 mois au niveau des zones de santé. Alors, donc, nous avons dit qu'on ne peut pas continuer à compter des morts pour assurer que nous avons des bonnes procédures et des bons papiers. Il faut trouver la façon d'aller plus vite avec les moustiquaires vers le ménage. Alors, et en plus, après avoir tout vérifié, tout regardé avec la loupe sur nos papiers, quand viennent les contrôles, on trouve toujours quand même encore des inéligibles derrière. Et donc, nous avons compté des morts, mais quand même, finalement, on a toujours des inéligibles. Et donc, on a dit qu'il fallait changer la manière de faire absolument. Alors, qu'est-ce que nous avons décidé de changer? Nous avons dit qu'il fallait tourner notre priorité des contrôles, des conformités, des procédures, des dépenses et des paiements vers une priorité vers la couverture des ménages et la protection des populations avec des services disponibles au moment où ils en ont besoin, avec des données de qualité qui assurent derrière. Et donc, ça veut dire que, au lieu que les pillards et leurs sous-récipiendaires mettent tout le temps à regarder papier après papier, on veut qu'ils orientent leurs ressources à assurer que la planification est bien faite et que les moustiquaires arrivent rapidement et qu'ils sont servis aux ménages au moment où il le faut. Et donc ça, c'est important parce qu'en restant sur l'autre approche, nous perdons du temps et puis à la fin, nous perdons de l'argent aussi parce qu'après, ces procédures-là, finalement, c'est pas toujours évident de les mettre en place, surtout quand on va vers les niveaux les plus périphériques, au niveau rural, au niveau des zones de santé où les mamans, en fait, ils allument leur brasero pour nous faire le thé et nous, on vient leur demander une facture. Vous voyez? Alors donc ça nous amène à des campagnes qui arrivent en retard et à des décès que nous comptons alors qu'on aurait pu l'éviter. Et donc, Annette a un peu posé la base du modèle parce que déjà, on a des ressources qui viennent du bailleur, du Fonds mondial et de AMF qui achètent nos moustiquaires. Et donc, les ressources arrivent chez 100 USBL qui contractualise avec AMA, qui est une ONG internationale, qui ensuite va amener les ressources au niveau des zones de santé. Et donc, à ce niveau-là, toutes les dépenses qui se font dans la partie au niveau central, au niveau provincial, ne posent pas beaucoup de problèmes en fait en termes de qualité et de capacité de production de justificatifs. Et donc là où nous avions vraiment des problèmes, c'est là où se passent vraiment les opérations et que les procédures sont lourdes et difficiles à mettre en place. Et c'est là où on a décidé de placer donc notre contrat entre donc l'ONG internationale et les zones de santé. Et donc, on a décidé que les livrables les plus importants pour nous, ça sera nous faire la preuve que les ménages ont reçu les moustiquaires. C'est les livrables les plus importants. Mais pour arriver à avoir cette preuve et ces moustiquaires dans les ménages, il faut des acteurs qui sont bien formés à faire leur travail. Et donc, on a mis un autre livrable sur la qualité de la formation. Et ensuite, il faut assurer que ces moustiquaires sont vraiment utilisés pour les ménages et que s'il y a des reliquats, on les récupère pour les redéployer dans la distribution continue. Et donc, pour nous, ça, c'était également quelque chose d'important sur lequel on a mis un troisième livrable. Et donc, pour séparer le rôle entre les prestataires qui fournissent ces services-là, nous avons identifié 3 structures qui allaient faire le travail indépendamment. D'abord, les premiers résultats qui est la couverture des ménages, qui mieux que les défenseurs des intérêts des communautés pour faire cette vérification. Donc, nous avons contractualisé avec une plateforme de la société civile qui a ensuite été capacitée avec l'assistance de l'AMP, entre autres, sur les capacités d'enquête sur le terrain pour qu'ils aillent vérifier au niveau du terrain que les ménages sont servis. Et donc, la couverture est vérifiée de manière totalement indépendante des zones de santé et de l'ONG internationale par une plateforme des organisations de la société civile. Et pour assurer que les acteurs qui sont les relais communautaires qui vont aller de ménage à ménage sont bien formés, nous avons demandé à une institution de recherche, qui mieux que les formateurs pour dire que la formation est correcte. Et donc, c'est une université qui a été contractualisée pour assurer que la vérification a été faite correctement. Ensuite, pour assurer que les moustiquaires sont bien servis au ménage et que leurs reliquats sont complètement récupérés, nous avons pris un autre sous-récipiendaire qui est chargé par Sanru de distribuer les moustiquaires en routine. Et donc, lui doit assurer qu'il a effectivement compté les moustiquaires restants pour les récupérer et les réinjecter dans le travail. Qui mieux que celui qui va utiliser ces reliquats pour vérifier que ces reliquats sont corrects. Et donc, nous avons donc choisi ces institutions qui allaient vérifier de manière indépendante que les services sont rendus afin que IMA puisse assurer les paiements. Alors, en plus, il faut quand même dire qu'il y a la régulation qui reste sous le leadership du PNLP et du ministère de la Santé, qui assure que les normes de la distribution sont respectées, et l'inspection générale de la santé pour assurer quand même que derrière, il n'y a pas, les zones de santé ne font pas n'importe quoi avec les ressources qui leur sont données pour la mise en œuvre de l'activité. Et donc, c'est pour dire que nous voulons changer ce que nous étions en train de faire, de produire une tonne de papier pour justifier les dépenses, vers assurer que les moustiquaires, la campagne est préparée de la meilleure manière et que les moustiquaires arrivent au ménage au moment où ils en ont besoin. Alors maintenant, je vais juste un petit peu définir mieux les livrables, les 3 livrables. Le premier livrable, donc, nous avons décidé que la couverture allait avoir la valeur de 75% de l'enveloppe de la zone de santé pour sa campagne. Et 5% de son enveloppe sera relié à la qualité de la formation. Et 20% sera relié à la justification et à la traçabilité des moustiquaires. Et donc, pour la couverture, les zones de santé vont avoir l'équivalent de la proportion des ménages couverts. Et donc, si la zone est dans une fourchette entre 80 et 100% de couverture. Donc, on va dire, s'il a 85% de couverture, il aura 85% de 75% de son enveloppe. Maintenant, s'il n'a pas atteint 80% de couverture, nous ne déclenchons même pas la vérification parce que nous nous sommes mis d'accord qu'en dessous de 80%, ce n'est pas recevable. Il faut qu'il reparte pour chercher les ménages. Et lorsque la couverture dépasse les 80%, alors on vérifie, mais on va quand même regarder la qualité également. Si les ménages reçoivent le nombre de moustiquaires qui convient à la taille du ménage, au nombre de personnes vivant dans le ménage. Et donc, si en plus de la couverture brute, on s'assure que la conformité des quantités par rapport au nombre des ménages dépasse 85%, et qu'en plus la couverture globale dépasse 95%, alors on donne la totalité de l'enveloppe liée à la couverture, donc les 75% de l'enveloppe. Voilà donc ce qui est du premier livrable. Ensuite, pour être sûr que ce travail va être bien fait, nous voulons que les relais communautaires, qui sont les gens qui vont vraiment aller sur le terrain pour délivrer les moustiquaires et faire les dénombrements, soient bien formés. Et donc là, on va regarder tous les relais communautaires formés, puisqu'ils vont se travailler par équipe à 3, on a besoin qu'un tiers de relais soit capable de bien gérer les données sur les téléphones. Si une zone de santé n'arrive pas à avoir suffisamment de relais formés pour bien gérer les données sur les téléphones, il perd 5% de son enveloppe. Il faut qu'il ait suffisamment de relais capables de gérer les données sur les téléphones. Et alors, le troisième livrable, qui vaut 20%, c'est que nous devons retrouver la quantité de moustiquaires réceptionnés par la zone de santé, moins la quantité distribuée au niveau des ménages, doit correspondre à l'inventaire de fin des distributions. Donc, si l'inventaire de fin des distributions montre un écart et que cet écart dépasse 1% de l'ensemble des moustiquaires réceptionnés, on va retenir l'équivalent du coût de la moustiquaire au marché local fois 2. C'est-à-dire que nous voulons dissuader les zones de santé à faire disparaître les moustiquaires. Parce que s'il le fait disparaître pour le revendre, nous, on récupère déjà le double de ce qu'il pourrait trouver. Voilà donc le troisième livrable. Alors, comment est-ce que nous avons assuré que le travail se fasse quand même? Parce que les paiements ne vont pas se faire complètement après les prestations. Donc, nous avons prévu que sur base du macro-plan, que nous puissions ajuster les coûts de la campagne sur des prix vérifiés indépendamment sur les terrains dans la province, pour que les coûts de la mise en œuvre soient réalistes par rapport aux besoins des zones de santé. Et donc, une fois que nous avons ces budgets de départ, nous allons démarrer les processus dans la province par la formation des équipes cadres de la province qui vont ensuite former les équipes des zones de santé, puisque ce sont les zones de santé qui sont les contractants. À la fin de leur formation, ils vont signer les contrats. Donc, ils signent les contrats avec l'ONG internationale et à ce moment-là, on leur délivre 15% d'avance sur leur budget. On avait préalablement évalué que le coût des formations variait autour de 10 à 15% pour toutes ces zones-là. Et donc, toute la procédure des formations qu'ils allaient déclencher pouvait être couverte par ces premières avances. Et donc, ils pouvaient bien faire leur travail. Alors, ils repartaient ensuite, ces équipes des zones de santé, pour former les infirmiers titulaires dans les aires de santé, accompagnés par leurs présidents des comités de développement de santé, pour faire des micro-plans. Et donc, les micro-plans permettaient d'ajuster leur budget. Et donc, s'il y avait des écarts avec le budget estimé au départ, on signait un avenant pour réajuster leur budget. Et alors, on délivrait 40% d'avance supplémentaire pour permettre aux zones de santé d'assurer, de parer au plus urgent en termes de logistique éventuellement. Et les zones de santé pouvaient poursuivre le travail maintenant par les déploiements des moustiquaires vers les villages, l'organisation des dénombrements et des distributions de moustiquaires et réaliser la validation en interne des données qu'ils auront nettoyées et mises en ligne. Une fois que ces données sont en ligne et que nous avons 80% au moins des ménages qui sont servis et que la zone déclare qu'il a fini le travail, nous envoyons les vérificateurs et ils vont faire les vérifications et repartir vers les zones de santé, leur présenter les résultats. Les zones de santé doivent voir les résultats avant que ça ne monte. Et donc, ils discutent de ces résultats au niveau des zones de santé et ils signent des procès-verbaux. 3 procès-verbaux, un procès-verbal de vérification des couvertures, un procès-verbal de vérification de la qualité des formations et un procès-verbal de vérification des reliquats des moustiquaires. Ce sont les 3 procès-verbaux qui vont servir en échange pour les paiements. Et donc, il n'y a plus de facture à proposer. Une fois que les procès-verbal est signé par toutes les parties, ça fait foi par rapport aux résultats vérifiés indépendamment et ça servira pour les paiements. Qu'est-ce que nous avons obtenu dans la province du Kwilu, qui était la province qui était choisie pour les pilotes de cette approche? Dans cette province qui compte 24 zones de santé, vous pouvez voir ici les couvertures vérifiées par la plateforme des organisations de la société civile et la conformité de ces couvertures en termes de nombre de moustiquaires en fonction du nombre de personnes vivant dans les ménages. Et donc, vous pouvez vous constater avec moi qu'on a bien dépassé pratiquement les 98% de couverture des ménages. Et quand on regarde la conformité des couvertures en fonction du nombre de personnes, on a dépassé les 90%. Au moment de la conceptualisation du modèle, on avait dit qu'il fallait absolument dépasser 80% de couverture. Et si la zone dépassait 95%, il avait un bonus. Donc après, on ne regardait plus les derniers pourcentages pour lui donner les 75% de son enveloppe. Et on avait dit également que pour 85% de conformité des couvertures, combiné aux 95% de couverture des ménages, on faisait une bonus. Donc, si vous pouvez voir, ça veut dire que toutes les zones de santé du Kwilu avaient donc pu avoir droit à 75% des enveloppes de leur campagne. C'est-à-dire que puisqu'ils avaient déjà 55% en acompte, il y avait déjà au moins 20% qui pouvaient s'ajouter. Alors, après, on a regardé que le nombre de relais communautaires sélectionnés était là. Combien est-ce qu'ils ont tous participé à la formation? Combien ont réussi à remplir correctement les formulaires? C'était ça l'épreuve. Remplir correctement les formulaires ODK dans un délai requis pour faire un travail de 8 heures, ce qu'ils allaient faire pendant la campagne, et s'assurer que ces remplissages est exhaustif et conforme. Donc, on a vu le nombre de relais qui ont réussi à cette épreuve. On a regardé par rapport, enfin, le nombre de ceux qui ont réussi et le nombre de relais qui sont nécessaires pour gérer les données sur les smartphones. On a vu que 4 zones de santé n'ont pas pu satisfaire au nombre nécessaire de relais pouvant faire un bon travail sur le téléphone. Ça veut donc dire que ces 4 zones de santé perdaient 5% de leur enveloppe. Alors, pour les derniers livrables, nous avons regardé les inventaires et comparé avec les stocks théoriques attendus et les stocks physiques vérifiés. Et on a vu les écarts, on a regardé les proportions de ces écarts-là et on voit que 3 zones de santé ont franchi les seuils de 1%. Et donc, ces 3 zones de santé perdaient le double du prix qui s'est passé au Kwilu. Mais pendant ce temps, puisque c'est une campagne qui s'est déroulée, ce sont des campagnes de 2021, premier semestre 2022, Les PNLP a donc organisé une évaluation de toutes les campagnes qui se sont déroulées sur la même période. Et nous avons donc essayé de voir qu'est-ce que cela donne par rapport aux provinces qui étaient restées dans l'approche historique de mise en œuvre. Pour rappel, nous sommes dans un pays où le poids du paludisme, ça fait quand même 12% du poids global du paludisme dans le monde, et où nous avons des goulots d'étranglement dans la mise en œuvre en termes de retard récurrent et de non-conformité de certaines dépenses. Et donc, l'idée, c'était qu'avec cette manière de faire, on allait améliorer notre manière de mettre en œuvre les campagnes pour avoir des meilleures couvertures des ménages, pour avoir des meilleurs délais dans l'organisation des campagnes et pour minimiser la question des inéligibles et des pertes d'intrants, des moustiquaires notamment. À ce stade de comparaison, nous avons donc toutes ces provinces où j'ai mis standard, c'est ceux qui ont travaillé en mode historique, et puis les Kwilu, malheureusement, mes slides, en changeant de machine, ont un peu avalé la ligne du Kwilu. Mais ce qui est important, c'est de vous constater que les couvertures, la couverture du Kwilu, qui est ici, hein, de 99,9%, donc il y a un petit décalage, c'est 99,9 versus 97,3 dans les provinces standards. Mais plus important encore, lorsqu'on regarde si les ménages ont eu suffisamment de moustiquaires en fonction du nombre de personnes qui vivent dans les ménages, l'écart est un peu plus important. Là, on a quand même 98,9%. Cette case devait se trouver là. Il y a un petit décalage avec. Et donc, 84,7% comparé à 98,9% dans la province ABC. Ça veut donc dire qu'en termes de couverture, ça fait quelque chose d'un peu mieux qu'avant. Et puis, on a regardé les délais. Le délai, c'est lorsque nous comparons le premier jour de la formation dans des ECP, des équipes cadres des provinces, et le jour où on lance la campagne. Alors, globalement, on se rend compte que le Kwilu fait 2 fois moins que les autres provinces en moyenne. Nonobstant tous ces aspects de logistique qui sont aussi, qui impactent négativement aussi bien en ABC que dans les autres provinces, la logistique, lorsqu'elle n'est pas bien ficelée, elle aura toujours quand même son impact. Et puis finalement, on a regardé les moyennes de pertes. C'est 0,3 en moyenne au Kwilu comparé à 0,5. Ça n'a l'air de rien comme ça, mais toutes ces campagnes, les 8 campagnes, là, ça fait 21 millions de moustiquaires. Alors, 21 millions de moustiquaires, pour 0,1%, ça fait 21 000 moustiquaires quand même. Et donc, ça fait un écart qui n'est pas négligeable à ce moment.
I will
Donc,
like to request
je vais atterrir pour dire que, alors, les pénalités, c'est quelque chose qui, nous espérons que ça va jouer même dans le temps, hein, parce que il faut avoir suivi la fessée pour se rendre compte que la fessée, ça fait mal. Et donc, puisqu'il y a eu déjà quelques fessées, quand on va revenir, ça va, nous espérons, faire mieux. Mais peut-être qu'il faut aussi penser à quelques bonbons, Anita. Pas toujours trop de fessées. Un peu de bonbons, peut-être que ça ferait aussi bien pour les bons élèves. Mais nous voulons dire également que il y a quand même des délais pour payer au moment des vérifications, surtout quand les zones de santé commencent à chercher à rattraper des ménages pour améliorer leur couverture. Ça fait traîner la vérification pour payer. Ça, c'est quand même encore un petit défi à relever. Alors, je disais tout à l'heure qu'il y a des défis qui sont transversaux. La logistique, quand ce n'est pas bien ficelé, ABC ou pas ABC, ça vous fait mal. Alors, finalement, un leadership fort du PNLP et du ministère de la Santé reste un élément important pour réussir. Et puis voilà, on pense quand même que peut-être que pour nos provinces qui ont des problèmes sécuritaires, ce n'est peut-être pas forcément les bons modèles. Je vous remercie.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Joris. Apologies for hurrying you up. Our time this morning is not on our side. We have very interesting presentation, but we have to move on a little bit faster. So our last presentation this morning is a quantification presentation from Emmanuel. Kindly keep to 20 minutes. Kindly, thank you.
Bonjour tout le monde. Je m'appelle Emmanuel Okengwa. Je suis le coordonnateur national de Grille 3 en RDC. Donc, je crois que les présentateurs précédents ont un peu brossé la particularité de la RDC, qui est un pays très vaste avec des provinces qui ont la taille des pays, d'autres pays africains. Et il demeure un challenge, déjà de par l'espace, mais aussi il y a un souci de dénominateur en RDC, parce que malgré toutes ces interventions, dans le système de santé, on continue quand même de remarquer quelques incohérences entre l'alignement des dénominateurs au sein même du système de santé lui-même, pour ne pas parler de l'extension aux statistiques administratives nationales. La présentation, elle est un peu en anglais, mais moi, je présente en français. Donc, Grille 3 a travaillé avec quelques partenaires d'implémentation du PNLP, déjà sur la question des dénominateurs, mais aussi sur d'autres questions d'appui. On va voir dans les slides qui vont suivre comment est-ce que cette question des dénominateurs, même si elle n'a pas été réglée complètement, a abouti quand même à certaines autres applications qui ont permis d'améliorer la qualité du suivi et du monitoring des distributions des moustiquaires. Donc, Grille 3 produit différents types de données géospatiales de base, notamment les limites, les couches des villages, les établissements, les localisations des établissements des soins, mais aussi des estimations Karoye des populations à haute résolution sur des dimensions de 1 hectare, ce qui permet d'avoir une représentation spatiale de la population et de ne pas uniquement utiliser les ressources qui sont les plus disponibles, qui sont les populations tabulaires, donc représentées sous forme de tableau pour tout un espace qui peut être des zones de santé ou des aires de santé. Et la production de ces estimations des populations peut être utilisée notamment lors des macro-planifications pour être sûr que la macro-planification s'aligne avec les populations à desservir. Parce qu'il faut noter, et on va le redire tout à l'heure, que le dernier recensement en RDC date de 1984, ce qui est vraiment vieux. Ces estimations peuvent aussi aider à améliorer la logistique et même la micro-planification pour être sûr que au niveau, on vient de nous parler de cette approche ABC en termes de vérification de qualité de couverture, mais aussi a priori, donc même avant ces vérifications, donc avant la campagne même, il y a des moyens d'être sûr qu'on a un alignement réaliste entre les besoins à couvrir et les besoins qui sont exprimés dans les microplans. Même chose pour la couverture en coupe, puisqu'on peut réaligner, détecter des endroits qui n'ont pas, ou des populations qui n'ont pas été couvertes, et améliorer aussi la rédévabilité. OK, donc je vais m'appesantir maintenant sur une de ces données qu'on produit qui sont ces estimations des populations Karoye. J'ai parlé du cas de la RDC, en fait, qui a un census qui date de 1984. Donc, malgré tous les efforts aussi de dénombrement qui sont faits lors des campagnes des distributions ou d'autres activités de santé, on a quand même du mal à uniformiser exactement la base de la population. On va les voir dans les slides qui suivent. Ces estimations Karowe des populations sont produites en croisant à travers un modèle. C'est un modèle et ce modèle, il est basé sur des micro-recensements, mais aussi un croisement avec des variables géographiques qui peuvent être les espaces des bâtis et d'autres variables géographiques. Avec quelques techniques d'extrapolation, on arrive à produire des estimations Karowe. Comme je vous ai dit, c'est à haute résolution, donc sur des surfaces de 1 hectare. Les endroits les plus foncés sont les endroits les plus densément peuplés et les endroits les moins foncés, donc plus jaunes, sont les endroits les moins densément peuplés. Les endroits gris sont des endroits inhabités. GRI 3 a produit ses estimations de population Karowe à travers ces micro-recensements. Je vous passe les détails en fait de toute la sélection des grappes et des stratifications. Mais après le résultat de la modélisation, on s'est rendu compte que amplement les populations extrapolées de GRI 3 étaient inférieures aux populations générales qu'on a. Pour rappel, en fait, on a en RDC, il y a une infrastructure qui s'appelle les DHIS2 dans lesquelles toutes les populations de la base jusqu'au sommet de la pyramide sont renseignées et ces populations sont extrapolées avec un facteur de 2,9% annuellement. Et en termes de prévision, à partir de ces populations qui sont en fait la référence en matière de santé pour la population RDC, on s'attend pour ces provinces à un total de 72 400 000 personnes. Et connaissant que chaque fois que le programme national de lutte contre le paludisme effectue des distributions des moustiquaires, cette activité est couplée à un dénombrement qui est la plupart du temps utilisé comme base pour les prochaines distributions tous les 3 ans. Et voilà un peu les populations extrapolées pour 2023 pour ces provinces en se basant sur les derniers dénombrements qui a été fait par le PNLP. Donc, on a quand même un écart d'environ 7 millions de personnes. Alors, il y a les mix, en fait, qui sont des enquêtes organisées par l'UNICEF, qui ont été faites en 2018 et qui ont produit une estimation moyenne pour ces provinces de la taille des ménages. Et en couplant cela au compte, en fait, des ménages qui ont été recensés lors des précédentes distributions des moustiquaires, on peut produire facilement aussi une extrapolation à partir des cette moyennes de mix. Et cette extrapolation, en fait, se rapprochait un peu plus de la population qui est renseignée dans le DHIS2. Donc, on se rend compte, en fait, qu'on a toutes ces bases de population qui diffèrent peut-être les unes des autres et pour lesquelles on est en train de trouver des moyens de les rendre un peu plus cohérents avec une approche qui est plus indépendante et plus scientifique et qui peut-être n'est pas liée soit à une contrainte de performance ou à une contrainte de distribution, parce que ce qu'on a remarqué, c'est que les nombres, par exemple, des personnes, des ménages, on peut voir, par exemple, que la population dans le DHIS2 est un peu plus supérieure, est très inférieure, de 7 millions environ de la population qui a été dénombrée par le PNLP. Mais pour des raisons des macro-planifications, c'est la population en fait extrapolée du PNLP qui est utilisée pour toutes les campagnes à venir. Il y a quand même eu, malgré cette discordance qu'on voit entre ces différentes populations, il y a quand même eu beaucoup d'éléments en fait de rapprochement, surtout avec les estimations de population Karowe, ce qui laisse entrevoir qu'il y a peut-être d'autres facteurs dans la modélisation de ces populations qui devraient être pris en compte et qui pourraient être intégrés. On voit par exemple ici un cas, il s'agit de la province du Haut-Lomami, dans la zone de santé de Kabongo, on voit exactement que suivant les population estimates qui sont un peu en fond en rouge, on voit que les points des ménages qui ont été collectés lors de la distribution des moustiquaires s'alignent exactement avec les estimations, les prévisions du modèle. On voit par contre, ceci est un exemple toujours dans le Olomami à Maliembankulu, que la densité en termes des ménages n'est pas alignée avec les estimations qui sont proposées par le modèle. Donc, on se rend compte, par exemple, que à cet endroit où on devait avoir, puisque la coloration est plus foncée, on devait avoir plus de ménages, on en a moins par rapport à cet endroit où la coloration est moins foncée et donc où on devait avoir un environnement moins densément peuplé. On voit vraiment qu'il y a un amas, en fait, de ménages. Et on peut voir les statistiques, en fait, en moyenne, par exemple, un alignement, une convergence complète ici, qui était la zone de Kabongo, mais pour la zone des Malembankulu, on voit vraiment une disproportion. Déjà, par le micro-recensement qui a été fait par Grid 3, mais entre le micro-recensement qui a été fait par Grid 3 et la distribution qui a été faite par le PNLP, donc le PNLP a dénombré 293 ménages, alors que lors du micro-recensement, il n'y avait que 45 ménages qui ont été dénombrés dans cet espace. Et donc, on a aussi on a des écarts en termes de population totale pour cet espace de 1 hectare. 1623 dans le cas du dénombrement PNLP et environ 261 dans le cas du modèle de population Karoye. Alors, on ne va pas que s'appesantir sur ces divergences, puisqu'on a eu quand même des success stories. Et parmi les success stories, c'est que dans l'accompagnement qu'on a eu à apporter au programme élargi des vaccinations, qui est un autre programme dans le système de santé congolais, le programme élargi des vaccinations a décidé pour l'année 2022, qui était un peu l'année des validités de ces estimations de population Karoye, d'utiliser ces estimations de population Karoye comme base pour leur performance en matière de couverture vaccinale. C'est conclu exactement par une amélioration des performances pour les provinces dans lesquelles ces estimations avaient été produites, notamment pour le Haut-Lomami, qui, après des enquêtes de couverture indépendantes qui étaient menées par l'École des santé publiques, ont démontré une hausse de performance et ont été même le champion en matière de performance vaccinale en RDC. On a eu, puisque la production de ces estimations de population en Karoye s'est fait conjointement ou en collaboration avec l'Institut national des statistiques qui est en charge de tous les recensements en RDC et ils ont mené aussi des enquêtes indépendantes dans certains endroits de certaines provinces et ils avaient eu des données en fait qui allaient dans le sens du modèle des populations Karoye. Ils ont fait une documentation qui est disponible auprès de l'INS. Alors, les modèles d'estimation Karoye, même si, par exemple, pour le cas du PNLP, n'ont pas été adoptés, puisqu'en fait, il y avait le PNLP toujours qui se basait sur les dénombrements des distributions précédentes. Cela a quand même vu la connotation spatiale qu'ont ces estimations des populations. Cela a quand même poussé à mieux se rendre compte de la répartition spatiale lors de micro-planification, mais aussi lors des évaluations des couvertures. Parce que les micro-planifications telles qu'elles sont faites actuellement, ce sont des micro-planifications qui sont ascendantes et on manque des fois des moyens de contre-vérification au sein de la pyramide elle-même pour être sûr que les données qui proviennent de la base sont exactement les données en termes de base de population. Donc, il y a eu quand même si pas sur le dénombrement, mais sur au moins la répartition spatiale des villages à visiter ou des villages à couvrir. un impact, en fait, on va le voir dans les slides qui suivent, qu'on a su mettre à profit, exactement pour être sûr que les accompagnements qu'on a portés aux différents partenaires d'implémentation comme IEMA sont des accompagnements qui leur permettaient de vérifier, toujours dans le cadre de cette optique de vérification et d'accompagnement ABC, la couverture des distributions. Alors, si on essaie de rentrer en profondeur sur ce troisième cas à succès, il faut savoir que, comme on l'a dit, il y a plusieurs données géospatiales qui ont été produites, pas seulement ces estimations de population, mais d'autres données de base comme par exemple les cartes et les limitations des aires de santé et des zones de santé qu'on a pu produire, mais aussi une représentation spatialisée des villages. Parce que même si on n'a pas pris en compte, par exemple, la représentation spatiale de la population, mais la représentation spatiale de villages influe aussi sur les micro-planifications qui sont faites par les aires de santé à la base. En sus, on a aussi produit les matrices des distances pour être sûr qu'on est en mesure d'optimiser les micro-planifications au niveau des aires de santé, mais aussi au sein des aires de santé elles-mêmes, des matrices des distances entre les centres de santé qui sont en grande partie aussi des dépôts ou des points de réception des bednets avec les différents villages. Alors, on a pu produire, à partir de tout ce qui précède, on a pu élaborer un outil qui permet de cibler ou de réaligner exactement les équipes des distributions pendant la distribution sur des villages qui potentiellement n'ont pas été visités. On peut voir par exemple en vert des villages qui ont potentiellement été visités, en rouge, encerclé en rouge, un village qui n'a pas potentiellement été visité. Cet outil peut permettre exactement en cours même de campagne de renvoyer les équipes de distribution vers exactement ces villages. Chaque fois, cela provient du croisement de la coordonnée en fait qui est collectée lors de la distribution dans le ménage et des coordonnées de tous les villages ou espaces habités qui ont été identifiés lors de la cartographie. Même si on ne fait plus de corrélation entre le nombre des moustiquaires qui ont été distribués exactement dans l'espace et le nombre de populations que nous avons estimées habitant cet espace. Donc, on peut voir, par exemple, que ici, c'est Corbeau, qui est, je peux dire, un campement composé de 26 buildings. Ça peut être des petites maisons. 26 petites maisons, on peut difficilement imaginer que ce soit un espace non habité, alors qu'on peut voir qu'il y a 26 maisons dans cet espace. Mais lors de la distribution, il n'a pas été visité. Ce qui peut, en cours des distributions, permettre à l'équipe de monitorage de dire, voilà, vous avez manqué potentiellement Corbeau, essayez de repasser par là pour vous assurer que la couverture elle a été complète. Donc ça, c'est un outil qui a été utilisé par IMA World Earth. Après, on peut voir plus en détail en fait les différents types de cartes en fait de visite avec tous les points rouges qui en grande partie sont des campements qui n'avaient pas été visités. Alors pour la redevabilité, on a en fait mis en place des mécanismes sur base exactement de toutes ces données de base qu'on a produites, mis en place de mécanismes pour détecter une inadéquation entre le nombre de moustiquaires qui ont été distribués et le nombre des maisons ou de buildings qui sont dans l'espace de distribution, pour potentiellement dire qu'il y a une anomalie dans la distribution en fait à ce stade. Donc, malgré le fait qu'on n'a pas, par exemple, on n'a pas utilisé directement les estimations des populations, les dénominateurs qui ont été produits, on comprend que des produits dérivés qui ont servi à la production de ces estimations de population ont quand même permis de détecter certains types d'anomalies. Donc, par exemple, on voit par exemple en rouge, ce sont les building footprints, la densité en fait des habitations. Et en noir, on voit en surnombre autour de certaines habitations, certains types de distributions. Donc, ce sont des centres d'anomalies où potentiellement, on pense qu'il y a eu plus de distribution que nécessaire. Et on peut avoir plusieurs types de visualisations qui peuvent permettre de suivre exactement comment la distribution a été faite. Et on a mis en place un outil de détection d'anomalies exactement qui croise les deux types des données. Et pour atterrir, enfin, et ça c'est peut-être juste un complément d'information, c'est que malgré le fait que ces données n'ont pas été, d'estimation de population n'ont pas été utilisées au premier plan, on a vu que des dérivations en fait de ces estimations de population ont pu être utilisées, mais aussi les données des distributions de moustiquaires ont permis en fait d'améliorer la cartographie de certaines provinces qui jusque-là n'avaient pas encore bénéficié de cartographie intensive. On peut voir par exemple ici l'ancienne cartographie qui était présente pour l'AS Laibo dans le DHIS2, qui est l'entrepôt officiel en fait de toutes les cartes utilisées en matière de santé. On peut voir comment on a amélioré les limites en fait de l'AS Laibo par rapport à ses voisins grâce à l'utilisation des données qui ont été produites par le PNLP. Et on peut voir à la fin la superposition entre ce qui était l'ancienne carte de l'AIBO avec la nouvelle carte de l'AIBO. On voit qu'on a plus de awareness sur la responsabilité en fait de l'acteur de santé qui contrôle l'aire des santé en question. Et peut-être que sa microplanification qui au début cherchait à prendre en compte tout cet espace sera plus affinée et sera plus réflectrice de la réalité. Ceci a été fait en collaboration exactement avec tous les acteurs de santé. Ce ne sont pas des données qu'on a parachutées et on a suffisamment des statistiques qu'on pourra partager avec les membres de l'assistance qui en ont besoin. Et sur ces points-là, je vous remercie.
Thank you so much, Emmanuel. We're going to open the floor for Q&A. So we'll be taking questions for all the presenters. We'll start from this table.
Thank you to the presenters. It's David Gittleman. These are really for Dr. Joris. Congratulations for really an innovative system and a detailed explanation of how it works and some of its challenges. Three very short, quick questions. The selection of Quilu as province, what were the reasons that it was selected and its representation and the applicability to other provinces for the success of a similar kind of approach. Also, just I probably missed it, the specific definition of coverage that you're using, and then what was the reaction of the officials at the Zone de Santé and of the community themselves to implementing this new system. Thank you.
Merci. Merci à l'équipe de la RDC et l'exposition vraiment très riche. Dans beaucoup de nos pays ici en Afrique, il se pose le problème n'est-ce pas, des dénominateurs. C'est à tous les niveaux. Province, au niveau des zones de santé, au niveau des aires de santé. Alors, quels sont les mécanismes ou les dispositifs qui sont mis en place par la RDC pour, n'est-ce pas, corriger, pour ajuster les données des macro et micro. Parce que souvent, il y a des écarts qui se présentent lors de vraiment des validations de données. La deuxième question, c'est relative à la gestion des données et surtout des reliquats, des MILDA. Quels sont aussi les mécanismes ou bien les mesures qui sont prises pour gérer les déchets et les reliquats des MILDA au niveau de zones de santé? Merci.
Bonjour, je suis Alexis, je viens du Cameroun. Cette session m'a obligé à faire le lien avec la session précédente, pendant laquelle Angus nous a présenté l'intérêt des données de suivi, on va dire, post-distribution, et il a bien montré que ce travail commence par les tests de qualité avant distribution. Mais on a le Pakistan qui a répondu à Angus en lui disant « Nous sommes tellement d'accord avec toi que lorsque nous recevons les moustiquaires, nous exigeons des tests de qualité. » Mais malheureusement, et de manière étrange, il y a une opposition ou une réticence du Fonds mondial qui est même allé jusqu'à étouffer l'idée d'une initiative du PNLP. Si on s'arrêtait là, on conclurait que le Fonds mondial ne s'intéresse pas aux résultats. Mais dans cette session, un État du Fonds mondial nous dit non, le Fonds mondial s'intéresse aux résultats au point même de payer pour l'incitation à de meilleures performances. Je ne reviendrai pas sur sa présentation qui était très édifiante. Et Joris, pour terminer, nous a montré à travers une très belle prestation comment le Fonds mondial accompagne sans rue justement mobiliser tous les partenaires pour une distribution efficace. La question que je vais poser en liant les deux sessions, c'est si on peut déployer autant d'énergie, autant de ressources, mobiliser autant de parties prenantes pour assurer une distribution efficace, pourquoi ne pas investir le minimum qu'il faut pour garantir la qualité? Ce que je veux dire, prenons l'exemple de la RDC, avec la présentation de Joris, si l'on fait tout ça pour distribuer des moustiquaires dont la qualité n'est pas garantie, en fait, on s'attend à quel résultat? Ma question ne s'adresse pas forcément à une personne ou un présentateur, c'est une question rhétorique qui interroge notre redevabilité tous pour ce qui est de l'efficacité des moustiquaires. Je vous remercie.
Kindly let us keep our questions short and our comments, and then we can ask more questions to the presenters during our lunch session. Thank you.
Thank you. Under the ABC contracting, as we noted that distribution of the rates is one of the important aspects, but along with that, accountability and best utilization and other aspects which is considered under the ABC contract. As we observed in DRC presentation, Joris mentioned that multiple stakeholders were involved in trainings, distributions, and post verifications. As there are a lot of activities which are linked with each other. So how this was managed that one stakeholders performance is not impacting in other stakeholder. And other thing which I want to ask is involving the multiple stakeholders at times increase the level of efforts of a national programs in terms of the communication, coordination, and performance, their performance review. At times also it increase, have some cost implications. So I also had some thoughts on this one. Thank you.
My question and comment and little bit help is required. I'm Dr. Maha, representing Indus Hospital and Health Network, who is principal recipient as a private sector for Global Fund grant in malaria. And we are having earlier, we did all the campaign as a tripartite agreement in with Directorate Area Control Program from government side and from our side, and the third party who is implementing. In this campaign, the arrangement is like Indus Hospital and Health Network is responsible to take implementer on board and third party verifier on board, and we will execute the campaign. Now we are struggling with getting good partner to onboard because the procurement process is quite laborious. So AMP, our Global Fund, can help to make very smart, crispy, some TORs are bidding documents to get more people in the competition for implementing partners. And secondly, for another verifiers, which is a third party verifiers, is also it's very difficult to jot down all the TORs and the bidding documents and get good partners. And when all these laborious documents, we started procurement, at the end we did not find good competition or no one is there. This is the help I required. And for this campaign, I just wanted to know the end result is the coverage. People get bed-nets or not. But our personal experience from our previous campaigns, quality is important. Reason being, if we are just giving bed-nets to implementing partners to go and just give them, so they just collect people in one areas and give all the bed-nets to for the village to one person. So under this ABC contracting, when we are not monitoring all the staff, how we will ensure all these aspects?
Souza de PSI Madagascar. La question s'adresse à Joris. Merci beaucoup pour la riche présentation. Ma question se pose sur l'évaluation des coûts, surtout après adoption de ce contrat ABC. Nous sommes vraiment intéressés parce que nous sommes en train de préparer une demande de subvention au niveau du Fonds mondial. Donc, nous aimerions avoir une idée sur la comparaison des coûts sur l'approche standard et le contrat avec cette adoption de APC. Merci.
Thank you. I think let us address those questions first. Time allowing will allow more presenters to come on. Thank you.
Okay, merci pour les questions qui montrent l'intérêt que les gens ont eu à suivre notre exposé. Je note pour la première question une question des préoccupations sur comment est-ce qu'on avait déterminé la couverture. Alors, il y a la couverture présentée par les zones de santé qui est celle qui est enregistrée sur les téléphones des relais communautaires et qui s'est rapportée au niveau du serveur. Ça, c'est la couverture administrative fournie par la zone, ce n'est pas celle qu'on paye. La couverture que nous payons, c'est une couverture vérifiée par la plateforme de la société civile sur base d'une enquête ménage faite sur 2,5% de ménages de la zone de santé. Donc, la liste des villages, c'est une liste tirée aléatoirement sur l'ensemble des villages de la zone de santé, qui est d'ailleurs tirée en fait indépendamment par AMF à Londres, pour montrer que c'est vraiment totalement indépendant pour que ce soit vraiment aléatoire. Et donc, à partir de là, la liste des villages sélectionnés est fournie à la plateforme là, avant d'aller sur le terrain. Et il déploie les ménages pour aller faire la vérification aléatoire dans les ménages à partir d'un échantillonnage systématique. Et donc, ça, c'est ce qui nous donne la couverture estimée
de la zone de santé qui sera payée. C'est cette couverture qui sera utilisée pour payer la zone de santé. Et cette couverture est déterminée de la même manière dans les autres provinces parce que c'est aussi AMF qui amène les moustiquaires. Et donc, ça nous permet de faire une comparaison reliable entre les couvertures fournies dans les provinces standards et la province ABC. Pourquoi les Kwilu? Alors, le point de départ, c'est que nous devrions avoir une agence internationale parce que nous avons deux types d'acteurs qui amènent les ressources au niveau des zones de santé. Il y a le ministère à travers la CHF qui fait aussi des paiements dans certaines provinces et des provinces qui sont sous IMA. Alors, la question, c'était, il fallait travailler avec une agence avec des mécanismes de gouvernance robustes et qui puissent vraiment nous permettre de bien mettre en place. Et donc, les provinces qui étaient sous IMA sont donc des provinces qui sont sélectionnées pour ABC. On a commencé par les Kwilu, qui est la première sur le calendrier. Actuellement, nous sommes sur la Mongala, qui est en train de terminer. On est en pleine vérification indépendante. Et puis, nous sommes en train de préparer les Sud-Ubangi. Quelle était la réaction des responsables? Alors, bon, globalement, je vais parler, mais ça sera un peu... Moi, j'ai eu l'impression qu'ils étaient contents, en tout cas. Mais pour tous ceux qui avaient eu des bonbons, il y en a eu qui ont eu des fessées quand même. Alors, ceux qui ont eu des fessées n'étaient pas les plus heureux. Alors, on a même un chef de zone qui a malheureusement en fait piqué une crise au moment parce qu'il a été doublement pénalisé. Il a dû se faire malheureusement hospitaliser pendant la session de validation. Mais bon, c'est la fessée, elle fait un peu mal. Mais c'est pour justement que la prochaine fois, ça se passe mieux, quoi. Donc, mais globalement, au niveau en tout cas intermédiaire, les chefs de la DPS, il est très satisfait. La grosse majorité des zones de santé sont satisfaits de la responsabilisation. C'est déjà ce qui est très important. Et puis, bon, ceux qui ont la fessée, bien entendu, ils ne sont pas tout contents. Il y a une autre question je ne sais pas, la prochaine question qui m'intéressait, c'était le Pakistan, qui demandait comment nous assurons qu'avec la multiplicité des intervenants, on coordonne et qu'on avance bien. Effectivement, c'était un élément important. Nous avions des réunions 2 fois par semaine, en tout cas au démarrage. Et l'intérêt aussi d'avoir Sanru, qui est le PR, qui est un peu celui qui contracte avec IMA, qui est le bras de mise en œuvre, et qui contracte avec les agences de vérification. Et donc, ça fait qu'on a un moteur pour coordonner tout le monde pour aller de l'avant. Et voilà, donc le PNLP associé à ces réunions hebdomadaires, d'abord 2 fois, puis chaque semaine, quand les choses étaient bien sur le chemin, ça nous a permis d'aller rapidement. D'autant que les gros décaissements viennent de Sanru, c'est le même acteur qui paye les vérificateurs et qui paye l'agence de mise en œuvre du contrat. Et donc, les vérificateurs n'ont pas de retard à avoir pour être sur le terrain. Ils sont sélectionnés à temps pour être opérationnels au moment où on a besoin d'eux. Et je crois que ça, c'était quelque chose qui était important pour notre réussite. Il y a une autre question sur la gestion de reliquats, j'ai pas bien capté. Il y avait une question sur la gestion des reliquats. En tout cas, les reliquats, j'avais dit que les reliquats des moustiquaires, c'est vérifié par un sous-récipiendaire des Sanru qui appuie les activités du paludisme en dehors des campagnes, qui est différent des IMA. Et donc, puisque les reliquats, quand ça reste, pour des questions de rationalisation, on ne veut pas les ramener pour ramener d'autres moustiquaires pour les femmes enceintes au PEV et les enfants. Donc, on construit d'abord sur les reliquats et on ajoute les besoins différents. Vous voyez? Et donc, c'est ça l'intérêt d'avoir celui qui va utiliser les reliquats pour vérifier les inventaires. Et donc, il a besoin d'avoir des inventaires vrais qu'il va utiliser
Parce que s'ils déclarent des inventaires qui ne sont pas corrects, nous déjà c'est nous sans eux qui lui donnons la différence. Donc, il va avoir des problèmes pour nous rapporter ses propres résultats après. Donc, il a intérêt à faire une vérification correcte des reliquats pour avoir les quantités qu'il va utiliser ensuite. Il y a alors une autre question sur la qualité des moustiquaires, très importante, mais j'ai été moi-même un peu choqué de voir la communication du Pakistan. Nous n'avons pas l'impression de ce type de refus de vérification de qualité de la part du Fonds mondial, parce que nous avons des vérifications avant les embarquements des moustiquaires à la sortie de l'usine. Et puis, après, quand nous arrivons au pays, nous avons des contrôles à l'entrée des moustiquaires. Et après la distribution, nous avons les écoles de santé qui font les suivis des distributions, mais ce n'est pas dans toutes les provinces, mais on les fait quand même de manière échantillonnée. Et donc, nous avons plusieurs contrôles à plusieurs étapes qui sont appuyés par le Fonds mondial. Donc, c'est un message qui ne va pas dans le même sens que ce que nous avons entendu du Pakistan, comme quoi il n'y aurait pas un appui à la vérification de la qualité de la part du Fonds mondial. En tout cas, ce n'est pas l'expérience que nous vivons en RDC. Peut-être un commentaire là-dessus.
Let's give, can answer one question?
Yeah, I'll have a very quick, I have a few points. There were a few questions asked around how do you get the right actors. So first I want to just emphasize under the new policy that the Global Fund will issue, you are not obligated to tender through a tendering process in order to structure a service delivery contract. You can do it with an SR. Okay. Now, when you go into selection of SRs, if you're planning to run the operations of that SR as a service delivery contract, the focus on the capacity assessment should be on their ability to deliver the deliverables. So less on the financials, more on the programmatic. Okay. So that's point one. And I'm happy to talk to you about that afterwards. Case in point, in the DRC, the health zones were the service providers. They weren't tendered. They were just there. They had to be the ones delivering. Okay. Second point on quality. You are the master of the deliverables you design in your contract. If you feel that you need to contract for quality, you contract for quality. And you identify what the evidence of that quality is and what the verification of that quality needs to be. So you can absolutely contract for quality. Third point, the interdependencies of the different stakeholders. This is definitely a problem, no question. And right now, actually, one of the interesting experiments we're doing, because this is an iterative process. You structure a contract, you see what works, you don't work, you adjust. So one of our main adjustments is to contract the verifiers under a service delivery contract. And their verification service must include timely delivery. So if they delay, they don't get paid. Right? Or they get a penalty. So again, you can use the payment incentive in any way you need to drive performance. Not to say that payments are the only way to drive performance. Jody says, right, there's a lot of project management that goes on. Look, the ABC isn't going to do away with your workload on the programmatic side. What it'll do is it'll free up your time from the financial and compliance side so you can spend more of your time doing proper programmatic project management and performance. Okay, that's what it's doing. It's not solving your programmatic problems. It's just giving you more time to do it. Okay. And then the last, in terms of the implications, cost implications, and I'm done. When you enter into designing a contract, a service delivery contract, or an ABC or a PFR contract, this is a negotiation between two parties. And the party that's delivering or playing any role in that contract, they need to think upfront about all the risks of them having to do more work. And they need to build that into their pricing negotiation. So the risk is on everybody. You spread the risk out. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Aneta, Joris, and Emmanuel. We can't take any more questions right now. Please look for them during lunch because time is not on our side. Thank you so much. Let us give a loud applause to our presenters today. We've had to rush them because time has really moved fast, but thank you so much. We have a lunch session around, it's going to be about reaching IDPs, refugees, and last mile populations. So you can grab your lunch and come in for the last lunch session. I think before we close this session, there was a comment by Marcelo online, and he wanted to clarify that it's important to mention that the Global Fund Quality Assurance mandates 100% of produced batches to be quality tested for chemical and physical parameters by independent, pre-qualified and ISO certified laboratories. So it was a comment online. So thank you so much.
Great. I wanted to thank Terry for, first of all, her excellent work with AMP, but then for chairing the session. And just quickly on the lunch session, it's a call out to people in the room. Joe will be leading that session, but we're going to be forming an AMP working group on fragile settings, last mile populations. So if you're interested in chairing or co-chairing that working group, you can speak with Joe or Jessica or any members of the core group. So just to flag that for people that may be interested in taking the lead on what Joe will be presenting. Thank you.